Chapter 336. For the Jade Heaven dynasty, having the location of the imperial palace exposed was definitely not a good thing. Empress, what do you think? The emperor asked his wife. Even though the rainbow clouds continued to gather, the terrifying power did not dissipate. The roar continued, causing the rainbow clouds to disperse. Just now, a roar came from the Sky Dragon continent. I'm afraid it was a warning from a Grotto Heaven realm expert. A primordial beast has awakened, the woman said softly with a frown. Sky Dragon continent? The emperor frowned at the mention of this continent. He would never forget the teachings of his ancestors. No matter what, he was not to have any ideas about that continent. That was the continent where the human race rose, and where the human king was born. Although it was extremely weak now, no one dared to set foot there. Empress, it seems that the prophecy came true. This is the 9th primordial beast that has awakened recently. 9 is the number of supremacy. Should we send someone to the Sky Dragon continent? This primordial beast must not fall into the hands of the enemy. The emperor asked. The woman did not speak. Instead, she took out her hairpin and waved it at the sky. In the sky that was originally filled with rolling clouds, there was now a long river shining with silver light. The long river turned into a flood dragon and swept towards the faintly discernible figure in the sky. Boom! The long river suddenly burst apart. Before it could even get close to the illusory figure, it had already been completely destroyed. Let's not. The woman finally spoke. Every primordial beast has the strength of a human king. Once they awaken, no one will be able to control them. Forcefully controlling them will only bring about endless disaster. Fine, HM. The sound is gone. The dragon's roar finally disappeared, and the figure in the sky also disappeared. The rainbow clouds once again covered the imperial palace of the Jade Heaven dynasty, the 9 underworlds continent. Darkness shrouded this continent all year round. There was no sunlight, only darkness. Everything here seemed to be filled with evil and unease. A black figure flew across the sky, covering the sun. Upon closer inspection, it was actually a giant bat. The bat's wings stretched out for dozens of li. Furthermore, the giant bat had 3 heads, each one more ferocious than the last. A person sat on the back of the giant bat. In the darkness, it was impossible to see his appearance. The living beings on the ground hurriedly prostrated themselves on the ground and prayed sincerely. Roar! The giant bat actually let out a roar that was close to that of a wild beast. With this roar, the souls of countless living beings flew out of their bodies and into the mouth of the giant bat. Little guy, you're really greedy. The man on the bat's back chuckled. Roar, all of a sudden, a dragon's roar resounded in the sky, and a phantom flickering with golden light appeared on the horizon. The huge bat screamed and fell to the ground. The souls that had been absorbed also flew back. The black figure sitting on the bat's back remained calm. He gently raised his right hand, and the giant bat regained its balance and flew into the air again. Ancient golden dragon? I didn't expect this guy to actually recover. Logically speaking, this is impossible, unless someone has the mountain and river martial spirit. The black shadow looked at the shadow in the sky, his eyes flashing with madness and viciousness. Mountain river martial spirit. The martial spirit that once belonged to the human king. I'm very interested. Just how much of an impact did the primordial golden dragon's roar cause? Ling Xiao wasn't sure. He only saw that after the primordial golden dragon roared, it lay down again and closed its eyes to sleep. Ling Xiao was very clear that the terrifying power of the primordial golden dragon wasn't something that he could fully control. However, through the mountain and river martial spirit, he could draw out even a trace of its power and use it. Whether it was cultivation or fighting, it would be of great help. The primordial giant beast is just a part of the ancient times. No matter how strong it is, it still can't escape the domination of the mountain and river martial spirit. The mountain and river martial spirit is the strongest martial spirit in the world. Since it has chosen you to be its master, treat it well and it will naturally repay you. At a certain moment, this sentence suddenly appeared in Ling Zhao's mind. He didn't know who said it, but it seemed to suddenly appear and disappear. Ling Zhao exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He gradually understood that when he awakened the mountain and river martial spirit, it was just a test by the original owner of the mountain and river martial spirit. Before him, many people had awakened the mountain and river martial spirit, but in the end they couldn't completely merge with their own soul, so it was always someone else's. Therefore, it was normal for it to be snatched away. But now, Ling Zhao's mountain and river martial spirit was different. It had completely become Ling Zhao's own. It was connected to his flesh and blood, and their souls depended on each other. The primordial giant beast, the primordial golden dragon's power was already terrifying enough that it could actually break the laws of the mysterious world. Then, how powerful was the mountain and river martial spirit that was even more terrifying than the primordial golden dragon? Ling Zhao was really looking forward to it. But now, it wasn't that he didn't gain anything. As long as he activated the mountain and river martial spirit, he could clearly feel the terrifying power of the primordial golden dragon. It was just that this power was too terrifying and he couldn't control it. Unless it was a last resort, he absolutely couldn't use it in large quantities. Just extracting it bit by bit was already very good. Even though he had lost 5 complete martial souls, he had gained an even greater power. This deal wasn't a loss. The most interesting thing was that when he absorbed the power of the primordial golden dragon, his body would undergo a special change. His pupils would turn golden and his hair would turn white. And in this state, his fighting strength would also soar. And there were 2 forms. One was the human dragon form, which maintained the appearance of a human, but could use some of the power of the primordial golden dragon. In this state, the quality and speed of his true essence would be greatly improved, making it easier to use human martial skills. The other was the golden dragon form, which completely transformed his body into that of the primordial golden dragon. His defense and strength would be greatly improved, but his speed would be relatively slow. He couldn't use any human martial skills, but he could use the martial skills of the Dragon Clan. As for the martial skills of the Dragon Clan, he should be able to find them in the divine text of the primordial golden dragon. He wasn't in a hurry now. Rice needed to be eaten 1 bite at a time. It was better to wait until he completely grasped the power of the primordial golden dragon before considering cultivating the martial skills of the Dragon Clan. In addition, no matter which form he was in, he couldn't use the 9 demons' divine arts. The 2 powers seemed to repel each other. Although he didn't know the reason, it shouldn't have much effect. After checking his body's condition and confirming that there were no problems, Ling Zhao began to try out the new mountain and river martial spirit. Chapter 337. Due to the mountain river martial soul's fusion reaching 100%, Ling Zhao's abilities had improved in all aspects. First of all, there were 9 special abilities: Analysis, Creation, Realm Model, Martial Will, Martial Soul Avatar, Devouring Fighting Soul, Devouring True Essence, 9 Meridians Spirit Body, Mountain River Dominator. All of them had been greatly improved. Moreover, Martial Will had transformed into Martial Dao Law. This ability was relatively complicated, and Ling Zhao still needed to study it again. However, in general, he could set a certain law during battle or cultivation, pay a certain price, and then achieve an even more terrifying effect. For example, during cultivation, the price was not to rest for 2 hours. The effect was to increase one's cultivation speed by 10% for 2 hours. Of course, this was a relatively simple law. Another example was during battle. The price was to be seriously injured by the opponent. The effect was to instantly inflict damage to the enemy with one's strongest attack. Whether the law was established or not, it had to follow the laws of the mystic world. The mountain river martial soul would give a reminder. Although the other 8 special abilities had not transformed, they had all been improved. Secondly, Ling Xiao could always stay in the soul imprint state without activating it. His vision, analytical ability, reaction ability, and so on had all been greatly improved. It was even more terrifying than before. He could see through the enemy's next move. He could quickly analyze the enemy's flaws or weaknesses. He had a super long-range vision of more than 100 miles and penetrating vision of 10 meters. Of course, penetrating vision was still affected by true essence. If the opponent used true essence to block it, then the penetration depth would naturally be reduced. Finally, Ling Xiao could finally use the Mountain River Martial Soul to fight. In the past, he did not dare to use the Mountain River Martial Soul because he was worried that the secret would be revealed. But the situation was different now. He found that the power of the Mountain River Martial Soul could actually be broken down and used. Currently, the 3 powers he could borrow were Glacier, Ocean, and Mountain River. The external manifestation was these 3 forms. He would not directly summon the entire Mountain River Martial Soul, so he was not afraid of being exposed. In any case, his Mountain River Martial Soul had completely merged with his soul, and its aura was completely different from the Mountain River Martial Soul that those people were looking for. As long as he did not summon his main body, he did not have to worry about exposing the secret. After having a basic understanding of his current abilities, Ling Xiao couldn't help but reveal a smile. He looked in the direction of Yuehua School, and then looked in the direction of Tianfeng City. He decided to go to Tianfeng City to take a look. He had not been back for a long time. He did not know what was going on in the Divine Sword Sect. Thinking back to when the Blue Eyes race launched a war, Tianfeng City was the first to bear the brunt of it. At that time, he couldn't come back to take a look. Now he didn't want to miss it. When he left Sky Cloud City, he had considered for Divine Sword Sect to directly move to Sky Cloud City and merge with Lin Zai's Latent Dragon Camp to form an even stronger Divine Sword Sect. But due to Sky Cloud City, Lord Wan Ben's opposition, it did not succeed. Therefore, after the war ended, the Divine Sword Sect returned to the Tianfeng City and used the Tianfeng City as a base to slowly develop. Although it couldn't be compared to the great sects, especially the 12 great sects, it still had a transcendent realm master like Grandmaster Bai Yun, so it stood to reason that it should develop well. However, when he followed the Divine Sword Sect's disciples who were hunting at the edge of the Dragon Submission Mountain Range and arrived at the Divine Sword Sect, he realized that the situation wasn't good. From afar, he saw a group of people gathered in front of the Divine Sword Gate. This reminded him of the time when the 2 great families of the Tianfeng City cooperated with the ninjas to besiege the Ling family. This group of people were filled with murderous intent, and there were close to 10,000 of them. The most important thing was that many of them were soldiers from Sky Cloud City, and they all had the city, Lord's Residence's emblem on them. These soldiers were all practitioners, and the weakest among them was at the 5th level of the Martial Vein Realm. As for the team leaders, they were all at the 7th level of the Martial Vein Realm. As for the generals, they were all at the 8th level of the Martial Vein Realm, and some were even at the 9th level of the Martial Vein Realm. Although there were only about 1,000 of them, but even so, it was still too many. He really didn't know what had happened in the past 2 months. Why did so many martial masters suddenly appear in the White Cloud Province? Could it be because the 12 great sects had reappeared in the world? Ling Xiao wasn't sure if his thoughts were correct, but he was very clear about the current situation. These people were definitely here to find trouble with the Divine Sword Sect. They were armed with bows and crossbows and various weapons, surrounding the Divine Sword Sect so tightly that not even a drop of water could leak through. They could directly charge into the Divine Sword Sect anytime and cleanse the place with blood. The Divine Sword Sect didn't seem to be easy to bully. At this moment, the disciples who were out on missions had all returned, and there were thousands of them. With the sect as a fortress, they built a tight defense. Shields, bows, and spears were all prepared. It was obvious that in this chaotic world, the Divine Sword Sect Master Ling Wuheng had tried his best to let this weak sect continue to survive. In the Divine Sword sect, there were many disciples at the 7th level of the martial vein realm and some at the 9th level of the martial vein realm. Ling Xiao even saw Ling Yihong among them. This fellow had finally become the pillar of the Divine Sword sect. Thinking back to when he left, this fellow was only at the 5th or 6th level of the martial vein realm. As expected, because of the reappearance of the mountain river martial spirit and the 12 sects, many things seem to have changed. These practitioners who were originally unable to advance to the martial master realm after awakening their martial spirits or broken martial spirits, their cultivation speed had obviously increased. Although they were still far from Ling Xiao and the others who had entered the sect, at least they were much faster than before. Ling Xiao was very happy for Ling Yihong. Although this fellow was only at the early 9th level of the martial vein realm and whether he could advance to the transcendent realm was still unknown, this was already very good. After all, Ling Yihong's aptitude was really limited. The 9th level of the martial vein realm, led by Wan Ben, stood at the front of the attacking team. There were also ninja warriors like Zhu Hua, Lu Xing, Jia Wu, Fei Lu, Fei Yu. Wan Ben's aura was very strong. Ling Xiao could feel that he should have advanced to the peak of the 9th level of the martial vein realm. It was a pity that he didn't enter the sect and couldn't get a higher level of cultivation martial arts. If Wan Ben wanted to break through to the transcendent realm, it would be very difficult. On the other side, the Divine Sword sect's leaders were Ling Wuheng, Ling Yihong, and Ling Xiaotian. It was just that they didn't know where Master Bai Yin had gone. Ling Xiao looked towards the Divine Sword sect, but there was no trace of Master Bai Yin. He couldn't help but frown. This Master Bai Yin had promised him to protect the Divine Sword sect. So why wasn't he in the sect? Although he was confused, he didn't want to delve into it now. After today's matter was settled, he should be able to ask Ling Yihong and the others. Chapter 338. The reason why Ling Xiao didn't want to help for the time being was that he couldn't stay in the Divine Sword sect forever. Some things had to be solved by the Divine Sword sect themselves. Of course, if there was any danger, he would definitely take action. Ling Xiaotian, you're old. You're only at the peak of the 8th level martial vein. You're not even as good as your disciple. Why struggle so hard? It's better to change the name of the sect and retire. Wan Ben said coldly to Ling Xiaotian with his hands behind his back. His tone was completely condescending. The name Divine Sword Sect was decided by several supreme elders and the sect master in the past. You can't change it just because you want to. Ling Xiaotian obviously didn't want to use force, so his tone was gentler. If Governor Wan Ben can give us a convincing reason, we will naturally contact Supreme Elder Ling Xiao, who is currently cultivating in the Yuehua school. It doesn't matter even if we change the name. I told you to change it. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you want to offend the Sword King sect? Wan Ben snorted coldly. Your sect's name has violated the taboo of the Sword King sect. It must be changed. As for that Ling Xiao, he offended the flame deity of the Yuehua school. Do you think he has a chance to come back alive? Ridiculous. This is too overbearing. Ling Yihong said angrily. So what if it's overbearing? Cut the crap. If you don't want to change the name of the sect, this governor will completely raze the Divine Sword sect to the ground for you. There's no need for such a sect to exist in this world. Wan Ben said disdainfully, Governor, there's no need to talk nonsense with them. We have more people and the help of the Sword King sect's experts. It's easy to eradicate the Divine Sword sect. These guys have been helping Lin Zhe, so they can't be left alive. Lu Xing, who was standing next to Wan Ben, said, Now that Lin Zhe has brought people to eliminate the bandits, and that Master Bai Yin has been seriously injured by the Sword King sect's experts, they have no chance. We can't wait for Lin Zhe to react. By then, I'm afraid the losses will be too great. He's right. Among the crowd behind Wan Ben stood several brightly dressed transcendent realm cultivators. Although these people were only at the first layer of the transcendent realm, in the secular world, they could be considered peerless masters. One of them said to Wan Ben, don't worry. With our Sword King sect supporting you, what are you afraid of? What's more, don't you want the gold grade, rare grade martial art that we promised you? This person was dressed in a green robe with the Sword King sect's emblem embroidered on it. Actually, Ling Xiao's impression of the Sword King sect wasn't bad. Back during the battle in Sky Cloud City, it was the appearance of the Sword King sect's disciples who scared off the Beast King Palace's disciples and saved Master Bai Yun's life. But this time the Sword King sect actually came knocking on their door because of the matter of the sect's name, wanting to completely eradicate the Divine Sword sect. Ling Xiao furrowed his brows. He knew very well that, in the same sect, there would be many different people. For example, in the Yuehua school, there were people like the Flame Deity and Wang Han Tianzuan. But this kind of thing was probably an order from the upper echelons of the Sword King sect. Because they felt that someone's name was unpleasant, they sent people to clean it up. This kind of action was simply like getting rid of an eyesore. This was the ruthlessness and indifference of the strong. Don't worry, the Divine Sword sect is just a trivial sect. You don't need to make a move to destroy it easily. Wan Ben showed a cold expression, then raised his right hand and waved, "Do it!" No matter how he thought about it, he wasn't afraid of the Divine Sword sect. In his opinion, Ling Xiao had only gone to the Yuehua school for 2 months. Even if his talent was outstanding, he should have just reached the first layer of the Transcendent Realm. He wasn't afraid of Ling Xiao at all. Wasn't Master Bai Yun also seriously injured? If another first layer of the Transcendent Realm Master came, it would just take a little more effort. He had as many as 10 first layer of the Transcendent Realm Masters on his side, and all of them were experts who were proficient in gold grade, entry grade, or rare grade martial arts. How could he be afraid of Ling Xiao? Following his command, Sky Cloud City's army of over 10,000 drew their bows and fired their sinful arrows. Of course, to him, this was nothing. Anyway, it wasn't the first time he did something like this. At that moment, the arrows in the sky were like locusts that covered the sky, enveloping the Divine Sword sect. Find cover. Raise your shields. Ling Wuheng calmly commanded the Divine Sword sect's disciples. At the same time, Ling Yihang, Ling Xiaotian, and the rest all held up their huge shields, completely blocking themselves behind. They didn't have Ling Xiao's terrifying defense and had to rely on these shields to block the arrows. Otherwise, they would instantly become a pile of arrows. Pai pai pa pa pa. Ding ding dang dang. The arrows smashed onto the walls and shields, giving off a hurried sound. Many dents had appeared on the shield, and many holes had appeared on the wall. Ling Xiaotian, you old fool, die. As the saying goes, to catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. Wan Ben naturally understood this point. Although Ling Xiaotian wasn't the strongest in the Divine Sword sect, but he was the backbone of the Divine Sword sect. As long as he was killed, everything would be over. Wan Ben retrieved a hard bow from his storage ring and knocked 2 arrows. Circulating his true qi, he shot them out. Those 2 arrows were actually sparkling with a light blue electric current in midair, its speed as fast as lightning. Pung pung! The 2 arrows pierced through the iron shield in Ling Xiaotian's hands one after another, and a burst of strong electric current struck Ling Xiaotian's body. The shock caused the old man's body to fly out, and a stream of blood floated in the air. When the few grand elders of the Divine Sword sect saw this, they hurriedly helped Ling Xiaotian block those 2 arrows. But even so, they were still forced to retreat several steps from the impact. Wan Ben claimed to be the #1 person under the Transcendent Realm, and it seemed like in White Cloud Province, his title wasn't just for show. Giant whale swallowing corpse. Flowing water sword shadow. The 2 people standing beside Wan Ben, Fei Yu and Fei Lu, took the opportunity to strike. One of them waved a long spear, and a giant whale's shadow formed behind his back. The long spear seemed to have transformed into a giant whale as it shot towards Ling Xiaotian. The other person's sword flashed, and a stream of water shot out rapidly, transforming into a giant flowing water sword shadow. Both of their targets were Ling Xiaotian. They obviously wanted to kill Ling Xiaotian. Both of their attacks were too sudden, and their abilities were much stronger than Ling Xiaotian. The few Grand Elders of the Divine Sword Sect couldn't possibly block them. Seeing that Ling Xiaotian was about to die under their joint attack, suddenly a loud roar was heard. "Those who kill my Divine Sword Sect's disciples shall die." Ling Xiao finally made his move. He couldn't possibly watch Ling Xiaotian being killed. This old man had done him a favor. His figure turned into a remnant shadow as he rushed over. The distance of several hundred feet seemed to be just a short distance. Numerous arrows landed around his body, but they were all deflected and shot towards Sky Cloud City soldiers instead. Chapter 339. Ling Xiao's heavenly dragon golden body had already reached the 5th level, although he had only just entered the 5th level. However, his terrifying defense was definitely not something that the martial artists of the secular world could imagine. His figure actually arrived in front of Ling Xiaotian before Fei Yu and Fei Lu's attack. With just a casual slap, the powerful attack collapsed and did not cause any damage to him. "If you want to destroy my Divine Sword Sect, you have to get through me, Ling Xiao." Ling Xiao's roar was like a dragon's roar. The terrifying vibration caused the arrows that were flying towards the Divine Sword Sect to explode in the air and fall to the ground. Ling Xiao. Wan Ben recognized Ling Xiao at a glance. It was impossible for him not to recognize him. Back when Ling Xiao was still in the martial vein realm, he had embarrassed him several times. He would never forget this person, even if he turned into ashes. "That's right, it's me, the Supreme Elder of the Divine Sword Sect, Ling Xiao." Ling Xiao stood there, releasing the aura of a half-step master. However, even so, it raised the morale of countless Divine Sword Sect disciples. "That's the legendary Supreme Elder Ling Xiao. Too powerful, as expected of a disciple of the Yuehua School. Yeah, he easily defeated the attacks of 2 9th-level martial vein realm experts. The Divine Sword Sect is saved. Little bastard, you came back just in time. I think it's because the Yuehua School can't survive anymore, so he came back. Then I'll kill you as well and turn your Divine Sword Sect into ashes." Wan Ben was blinded by anger. He had forgotten that he could not afford to offend the Yuehua School. "Wan Ben, oh Wan Ben, if you had obediently been the governor of the White Cloud Province, no one would have done anything to you. However, you should never have colluded with the disciples of the Sword King Sect to cause trouble for the Divine Sword Sect." At this point, Ling Xiao looked at the disciples of the Sword King Sect and said, "I'm Ling Xiao, an outer disciple of the Yuehua School. You must be inner disciples of the Sword King Sect. Your Sword King Sect and our Yuehua School mind our own business. If you leave quickly, you can still coexist peacefully." "Ha ha ha! A mere Yuehua School's outer disciple dares to order our Sword King Sect's inner disciple around." A disciple of the Sword King Sect laughed out loud and said, "Ling Xiao, if you're willing to change the name of your Divine Sword Sect, kneel down and apologize to the Sword King Sect, and let everyone from your Divine Sword Sect enter the Sword King Sect as slaves. Then we can consider letting you live." Every sect had slaves. Once the losing side of a sect war was captured, most of them would become slaves and do some of the lowest and most miserable jobs. Is there really no room for negotiation? If possible, Ling Xiao really did not want to be enemies with the Sword King Sect. It was not because he was afraid, but because he really found it troublesome. However, the disciples of the Sword King Sect clearly did not know what Ling Xiao was thinking. Their disdainful whispers were filled with a strong sense of ridicule. "If you don't do as we say, the Divine Sword Sect will be removed from the Sky Dragon continent today." "That's right. What is the Divine Sword Sect?" A mere unrated sect dares to call itself the Divine Sword Sect. Obediently do as we say, otherwise, the Divine Sword Sect will be turned into scorched earth in an instant. The disciples of the Sword King sect were very arrogant. They were also very proud. This was probably the so-called birds of a feather flock together. Forget it. Since there's no room for negotiation, then none of you can go back alive today. Ling Xiao sighed helplessly. He did not want to kill anyone, but some people really deserved to be killed. His tone was very calm, without the slightest bit of killing intent, but his eyes were filled with determination. Suddenly, a large amount of true essence spurted out from his body, like a tyrannical fierce beast, roaring as it circled around his body. To deal with these people, there was really no need to use two strong moves. What he used was the Imperial Sword Technique bronze scroll. However, the thing he controlled was not the 36 Big Dipper flying swords, but the scattered arrows on the ground. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He pointed forward with both hands, and countless arrows whistled as they pounced towards Wenben's army. The sound of air being torn apart continuously resounded in the air, like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves. The most terrifying thing was that these arrows were fused with the 12 golden lotus arts: wind, thunder, and rain. 3 kinds of power: wind's splitting effect, thunder's splitting effect, rain's corrosive effect. Imperial sword technique, funeral. Ling Xiao roared as he rushed towards Wenben's army, accompanied by arrows that blotted out the sky. Today he was no longer the ignorant person he used to be. His strength was enough to rely on his own strength to destroy all the attacking martial artists. Ling Xiao might not like to kill indiscriminately. However, once he decided to kill some people, he would no longer hesitate. Wenben and his followers were fine. The experts of the Sword King sect were fine. Today, he could not let a single one of them go. This was not only a good thing for the Divine Sword Sect, it was also a good thing for him. Moreover, so what if he completely fell out with the Sword King sect? They had already killed their way to your door. Could it be that you really agreed to be a slave that was inferior to pigs and dogs? Although the arrows controlled by the Imperial Sword Technique were not as terrifying as the 36 Big Dipper flying swords. Don't forget that he was now a peak Transcendent Stage 1 Grandmaster. His body contained an extremely powerful true essence. Those fellows on the other side, other than Martial Vane Stage 9 Martial Master and above, were basically unable to withstand his arrows. Poochie, poochie! Amidst the continuous sounds, the shields of Wenben's army were pierced, the armor on their bodies were pierced, and in an instant, thousands of people had already fallen to the ground, no longer breathing. Ah! With a miserable cry, in Wenben's army, Martial Vane Stage 9 Martial Master Fei, Lu attempted to use his long sword to block the arrows. However, at that moment, the terrifying chill on the arrows had an effect. Fei Lu's body instantly froze, and then was shattered by another arrow. How can it be so powerful? Wenben turned pale with fright. He was still able to temporarily block the terrifying arrows, but a large number of the soldiers behind him died in an instant. This was the foundation of his survival. Without these soldiers, he, the governor Baiyin, would become a commander without an army. At that time, as long as Lindsay attacked, he would have no way to deal with it. Wenben's heart was bleeding. His soul was trembling. The flying fish roared angrily. Fei Mu was dead. Fei Yin was dead, and now Fei Lu was also dead. And they all died at the hands of Ling Xiao. Kill! Kill him! Attack Ling Xiao with all your strength. Everyone from the Sword King sect, I hope that you can quickly attack and use your divine skills to kill this vicious brat on the spot. Kill your way into the Divine Sword Sect. Leave no one alive. Kill, kill, kill. Amidst the angry roars, more than a dozen Martial Vane Stage 9 Martial Masters surrounded Ling Xiao, and then charged over together. Among them, the most furious was probably Fei Yu. He held a long spear in his hand and took the lead, swearing to tear Ling Xiao into pieces. The image of the whale behind him became increasingly solid. Chapter 340. Fei Yu took the lead and charged towards Ling Xiao. Above his spear, true qi had almost condensed into a solid form. If it was an ordinary person, even if it was an ordinary first-level transcendent realm cultivator, they would definitely not dare to block this move. Whale swallowing 10,000-ly. Fei Yu roared as he finally approached Ling Xiao. His expression was incomparably ferocious, his eyes filled with hatred and boundless killing intent. The terrifying giant whale opened its huge mouth and swallowed Ling Xiao with a momentum that blotted out the sky. Courting death. Ling Xiao had already let Fei Yu and Fei Lu off when he was in Sky Cloud City. However, these two did not know what was good for them and actually followed Wan Ben to attack the Divine Sword Sect. This time, he would definitely not show mercy. Ling Xiao did not even bother to look at Fei Yu's attack. With a casual slap, the common grade artifact spear, which was condensed with almost all of Fei Yu's true qi, broke into several pieces. Pooh! Fei Yu's body was actually pierced by his broken spear. The terrifying true qi caused his bones to break inch by inch, causing him to spit out large mouthfuls of blood. Ling Xiao turned his body slightly and approached the flying fish. Then he slammed his palm down. Divine Prison King Fist, Bull's Head Smash. His fist was clenched tightly like a giant bear's fist. One could feel the true qi flowing madly in his hand, and his muscles contained a terrifying, explosive power. It was like a terrifying fist from hell, causing one to tremble with fear. Fei Yu had not yet reacted to the previous attack, so he was unable to dodge. Fei Yu's fist landed solidly on his head. How could Fei Yu block a fist that could shatter a bull's head? Everyone only heard Fei Yu's blood-curdling scream, and then saw Fei Yu's head explode under that terrifying fist. His body was directly smashed into the ground. In an instant, there were no signs of life. Beast! In an instant, Wan Ben, Zhu Hua, Jiawu Lu Xing, and more than a dozen ninth-level martial veins from Heavenly Enduring Academy furiously pounced on Ling Xiao. The terrifying true essence condensed together, converging into a huge true essence hand. This hand was as tall as a mountain and as big as a mountain. It whistled through the air and lifted up the stone slabs on the ground. It was as if there was an earthquake. The true essence giant hand wrapped around the bluestone slab and shot towards Ling Xiao, as if it wanted to instantly turn Ling Xiao into meat paste. Sigh, he really doesn't know the meaning of death. Even until now, you still can't see the difference in strength. You really deserve to die. Looking at the true essence giant hand, Ling Xiao couldn't help but sigh. These people thought that they could kill him by joining forces. What a joke. Ling Xiao stood there and gently struck out with his palm. Divine Hell King's Fist, Destruction. A terrifying aura instantly filled the entire space. In that instant, all the attacks were nullified. The true essence giant hand shattered and disappeared without a trace. The swords, spears, strange weapons, and even the stone slabs were all reduced to dust. Not only that, the terrifying power of destruction was still not over. In a panic, Wan Ben hurriedly blocked the 2 9th-level martial vein martial masters in front of him. Then he saw the two people's bodies explode, and he retreated dozens of feet away in horror. In this attack, 7 or 8 of the dozen or so 9th-level martial vein martial masters died in an instant, leaving only 9 people. And these people were also scared out of their wits. This is impossible. Even a first-order, transcendent realm grandmaster would have no choice but to retreat. How could he block our attacks so easily and even have a chance to counterattack? How could he block our attacks so easily? How could he even have a chance to counterattack? This guy is simply a monster. When he left Sky Cloud City, he was only at the peak of the 8th-level martial vein realm. How could he have such powerful strength? I understand. This guy must have had some fortuitous encounter in Yuehua School, and then obtained some kind of treasure. Suddenly, a grandmaster of the Sword King sect, shouted. Because they couldn't explain why Ling Xiao's strength was so strong, they naturally thought that Ling Xiao had some kind of treasure. They didn't guess wrong. Ling Xiao had a treasure on him, but he was too lazy to use it until now. Fiery sword skill. At the thought of Ling Xiao having a treasure on him, the Sword King sect masters obviously had other thoughts. One of the Sword King sect's first-level, transcendent realm martial artists held a long sword and suddenly pierced it. When this sword pierced out, a raging fire instantly condensed into a sword ray and pierced towards Ling Xiao. Behind this person, there was a faint shadow of a small red sword. That should be his martial soul. It was probably a type of sword martial soul. This fiery sword ray was very terrifying. The flames rolled and the power was terrifying. Once it was blocked, it would immediately explode. The resulting flames were enough to turn the surrounding 100 meters into scorched earth. Even the bluestone slabs would be burned to ashes. It could be said that this fiery sword skill was one of the Sword King sect's signature martial skills. It was a rare gold martial skill. This Sword King sect master used this move to deal with Ling Xiao. It could be said that he was giving Ling Xiao a lot of face. Ha ha ha, Yuehua School's outer disciple trash. I'd like to see how you're going to survive under this sword. It had to be said that the Sword King sect master's timing was very clever. It was right after Ling Xiao finished using destruction. He had just used up his old strength and hadn't recovered his new strength. He couldn't do anything to defend himself. The fiery sword ray had already pierced Ling Xiao's protective True Yuan at an extremely fast speed and exploded. Ha ha ha, good death! As expected of a Sword King sect master, his methods are really impressive. Is this a rare gold martial skill? It's really terrifying. Seeing Ling Xiao's body being hit by the fiery sword ray and then exploding, a deep pit was formed on the ground. Wan Ben and the others were very happy. They felt that Ling Xiao was going to die without a doubt. Ling Xiao, great elder. Ling Yihang and Ling Wuhen turned pale with fright. All the disciples of the divine sword sect cried out in alarm. Ling Xiao was their savior. If he died like this, they would really be in despair. Ha ha ha, trash will always be trash. A mere Yuehua School's outer disciple dares to be arrogant in front of us? My Sword King sect's fiery sword skill is not something you can block. The Sword King sect disciples all laughed. They didn't think that killing a Yuehua School's disciple would attract the Yuehua School's revenge. One had to know that the position of an outer disciple in each sect was too low. It was so low that even if they died, it wouldn't cause much of a stir. Fiery sword skill? It's really boring. Such a rare gold martial skill is really a waste in the hands of trash like you. Suddenly, a voice came out from the flames. Ling Xiao slowly walked out. His body was shining with golden sky dragon scale armor. Not only was he not injured at all, even his clothes were not damaged. The defensive power of the sky dragon scale armor wasn't just strong. It was extremely strong. Chapter 341. Return. In the end, the explosion did not spread out. The flames that should have turned everything within 100 meters into scorched earth were easily extinguished by Ling Xiao. All the flames and power were forcefully absorbed into his body. However, he did not convert them. Instead, he raised his hand and sent the flames and the power of the explosion back. This is bad. Run. The disciples of Sword King's sect were all transcendent realm masters, after all, so their eyesight was still quite good. Although they didn't know how Ling Xiao had done this. At this moment, they all felt a sense of danger and hurriedly warned him before fleeing. Asterisk Kong, asterisk the flames exploded in the middle of Wan Ben's army. In an instant, there were no living things within 100 meters. The cultivators in Wan Ben's army who could not escape were all burned to ashes by the flames. At least 1,000 people died in this counterattack. Wan Ben and the others reacted fast enough and avoided the counterattack in time. Otherwise, they would have been buried together with the enemy. How can this Ling Xiao be so powerful? Monster. He is simply a monster. Wan Ben's heart began to tremble. With the help of the Sword King sect, he had been accumulating strength for himself in Baiyun province recently. Many small families and sects were subdued or destroyed by him. He was very ambitious and wanted to establish a country in Baiyun province. This time, the higher-ups of the Sword King sect did not know about it. These dozen or so inner sect disciples of the Sword King sect were secretly bribed by Wan Ben, so they casually found an excuse to destroy the Divine Sword sect. Of course, the higher-ups of the Sword King sect did mention that the name Divine Sword sect was not suitable and could be destroyed. But this time, they did not know about the operation. The Divine Sword sect, which they thought could be easily destroyed, now had a big problem. Just Ling Xiao alone made it difficult for them to advance. In a flash, they had lost thousands of people. Monster? Yes, you are right. I, Ling Xiao, am a monster, but I was forced by you. As Ling Xiao spoke, he slowly walked towards Wan Ben's army. He once thought that since he was already at Yuehua school, he wouldn't care about Wan Ben anymore. He also wouldn't care about Fei Yu, Fei Lu, and the others trying to kill him. However, now it seemed that he was still too naive. The wild ambitions of these people finally burst forth uncontrollably. Since that was the case, he would deal with them all today. Ling Xiao's terror not only made Wan Ben and the others tremble with fear. Even the disciples of the Sword King sect were frowning as if they were unwilling to continue fighting. Wait! An expert from the Sword King sect said loudly, "You better think carefully about the consequences of harming an inner disciple of the Sword King sect. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, you'll still die." Whoosh! If he hadn't said those words, he might have been able to live a little longer. But now, Ling Xiao had already used the cloud dragon divine travel without waiting for him to finish his sentence. With such terrifying speed, the distance of several hundred feet seemed to have been closed. No one saw how he moved. Several martial masters blocking the way were instantly sent flying, and when they fell to the ground, they were no longer breathing. Then, someone saw that Ling Xiao had already arrived in front of the Sword King sect's expert. So what if you're an inner disciple of the Sword King sect? If your sect doesn't know what's good for you, I'll still destroy you. As soon as he finished speaking, the Sword King sect's First Order, Transcendent Realm expert, was sent flying and slammed into the wall like a mosquito, his blood flowing all over the wall. Young Master! The peak First Order, Transcendent Realm cultivator, who used the Raging Flame Sword art before exclaimed loudly, You actually killed our Sword King sect's young master. You're finished. You're really finished. This person was the strongest disciple of the Sword King sect who helped Wan Ben this time, and he was also the leader other than the young master. Ling Xiao didn't know who the young master was. Probably the son of one of the Sword King sect's elders or hall masters. Who cares? I've already killed him. He looked back at the Sword King sect's Transcendent Realm expert, who used the Raging Flame Sword art, and said indifferently, "Since he's your young master, you can accompany him to the grave, lest he be lonely on the road to the Yellow Springs." Ling Xiao still didn't draw his sword. A First Order, Transcendent Realm cultivator wasn't worthy of him drawing his sword. Wind Constellation, Divine Prison King Fist. Ling Xiao tried to integrate the 12 Golden Lotus arts, Wind Constellation, into his Divine Prison King Fist. At that moment, his fist was surrounded by a fierce wind. He could feel that the speed of this punch would be even faster and more powerful. Before the fist arrived, the Sword King sect's Transcendent Realm expert felt a sharp pain on his face. Startled, he hurriedly used a defensive martial skill, Raging Flame Armor. This wasn't a real armor, but a true chi armor condensed from a defensive martial skill. Upon closer inspection, It looked like a thick layer of hard shell condensed on the outside of the body, and around this hard shell was a blazing flame. At this moment, the Sword King Sect's disciple really looked like a raging flame, war god. The flames surged and were extremely hot. This raging flame armor was similar to Ling Xiao's heavenly dragon scale armor in many ways. Once condensed, not only was it invulnerable, but it also had an extremely terrifying defensive power, and it could also increase one's strength. The difference was that the raging flame armor had the ability to burn the opponent. Ha ha ha! Come at me if you're not afraid of death. You think you can hurt me? The Sword King Sect's transcendent realm expert laughed confidently. However, in the next moment, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Ling Xiao's punch directly cut through the raging flame armor, and then the Sword King Sect's disciple's body was torn apart. Perhaps because it was too fast, the Sword King Sect's disciple didn't realize he was dead. His head fell off, and he could even see his body slowly disintegrating. Huh, what's going on? Why can I see my body? The Sword King Sect's disciple suddenly realized something, and his face instantly turned pale. I'm dead? How did I die? Isn't he a half-step grandmaster? Why was he able to kill me so easily? Even until his death, he still couldn't figure out how Ling Xiao was able to kill him. He died in a daze. What should we do? Young Master and Boss are both dead? Young Master aside, Boss is a peak first layer, transcendent, realm grandmaster. How could he be killed by this little brat? Could it be that he's also a transcendent realm grandmaster, but was hiding his strength? That's impossible. He's only 14 years old. We've investigated this guy thoroughly. Don't worry about it so much. This little brat is strange. Let's retreat and report back to the sect. We'll send stronger inner sect disciples to settle accounts with this little brat. He's so strong. He must have some kind of treasure on him. Let's go. Asterisk the remaining Sword King Sect's disciples saw that the situation was not good, and they all used their movement skills to escape. They saw Ling Xiao kill their young master with a single move. He killed their boss with a single move. None of them were as strong as their boss. Wouldn't staying be courting death? Chapter 342. Stay here. Ling Xiao knew the danger of letting a tiger return to the mountain. Once these Sword King Sect disciples returned to the Sword King Sect, he and the Divine Sword Sect would be in big trouble. So, no matter what, these people had to be killed to avoid leaving behind a disaster. With a roar, 12 Big Dipper flying swords flew out, streaking across the sky and piercing towards the remaining 12 Sword King Sect inner disciples like lightning. The flying swords were enhanced with the power of meteorological wind, so they were faster and more lethal. The friction between the flying swords and the air produced little sparks, and a fishy smell filled the air. Ah, 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 ah. 12 consecutive screams. The 12 Sword King Sect, first layer, transcendent realm inner disciples, had their throats pierced and fell heavily to the ground. They fell one after another. Ling Xiao retrieved the 12 flying swords, and with a wave of his hand, all 12 martial spirits were absorbed into his mountain river martial spirit. However, these martial spirits, along with the ones he had devoured before, were used to strengthen the immemorial golden dragon's soul. So Ling Xiao did not plan to use them alone. Although the immemorial golden dragon had awakened, its soul was still very weak. So it needed to rely on a large number of martial spirits to continuously strengthen its soul until it fully recovered. Ling Xiao was very clear that the benefits of the immemorial golden dragon were definitely much greater than those martial spirits he had stolen. After devouring the martial spirits, Ling Xiao's body shook slightly, and his true qi instantly shook off the blood and smoke on his body. His clothes were clean as if he had just been washed, as if he had never fought. Wan Ben, your backer is already dead. What else do you have to say now? Do you really think that you can destroy my divine sword sect by colluding with these trash from the Sword King sect? Ridiculous. Ling Xiao turned around and looked at Wan Ben, who was standing there in a daze, with an indifferent expression on his face, as if Wan Ben was not worth mentioning in his eyes. At this moment, Wan Ben was extremely terrified. However, he did not plan to beg for mercy. Seeing Ling Xiao's biting cold-killing intent, he was very clear that Ling Xiao would not leave anyone alive today. What he was thinking about now was how he could borrow the strength of the remaining warriors to escape from Ling Xiao. But no matter how he thought about it, there was almost no chance of winning. He couldn't understand how Ling Xiao had become so strong after only joining Yuehua school for 2 months. He was several times stronger than Master Baiyun. Not only him, but the other ninjas also couldn't understand. They were so depressed that they wanted to go crazy. The ant that he had thought he could easily crush suddenly became a huge monster, a huge beast from the great, desolate Aeon. This guy is only 14 years old. A 14-year-old boy had actually forced an army of over 10,000 cultivators from White Cloud Province, as well as a dozen Transcendent Realm Masters from Sword King Sect, into a dead end. If this matter were to spread out, it would definitely cause quite a stir in the Sky Dragon continent. How could Ling Xiao's performance be that of an outer disciple? If he was an outer disciple, then those inner disciples of the Sword King Sect were nothing. Could it be that this guy was a peerless genius that only appeared once in 100,000 years? Sir Governor, there is no need to worry. He killed more than a dozen Transcendent Realm Masters in one breath, so his true chi must have been exhausted. Don't look at how relaxed he is now. It's just a bluff. As long as we take action, we will definitely be able to kill him. Lu Xing suddenly said to Wan Ben. His words were like a wake-up call for a dreamer. Wan Ben also realized that no matter how strong Ling Xiao was, even if he really hid his strength, even if he was a Transcendent Realm cultivator, but fighting until now and killing so many people, he must have consumed a lot of energy. He had encountered this kind of thing before. Many cultivators did not hesitate to consume a huge amount of true qi in order to deter the enemy. Smart people could see that they were strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Only a fool would run away. That's right. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If we miss it, I'm afraid this boy will become even stronger. Zhu Hua said coldly, Sir Governor, there is no need to hesitate. Even if we can't kill him today, as long as we can seriously injure him, we can leave calmly and inform the masters of the Sword King Sect to wipe out the divine Sword Sect in one fell swoop. The master beside Wan Ben also said loudly, We can't hesitate. Otherwise, when he recovers his true qi, none of us will be able to leave. Lu Xing's face was anxious. Since Wan Ben refused to move, he took the first step. The long sword in his hand trembled as a saber master martial spirit appeared behind him. Then his figure turned into a sword light and directly stabbed towards Ling Xiao. He wanted to use his actions to prove that Ling Xiao was indeed an arrow at the end of its flight. Flash, life seizing. This sword was too fast. From the moment Lu Xing made his move to the moment the sword light arrived in front of Ling Xiao, it was almost the blink of an eye. Lu Xing had used this move before. It was fast and ruthless. But today, this attack was even more powerful and faster than before. Pathetic. Ling Xiao looked at the approaching sword light and couldn't help but shake his head. When he was in the Latent Dragon camp, he felt that these 3 people were quite talented. If they cultivated well, they might become good cultivators in the future. However, some people just felt uncomfortable living and insisted on courting death. What could he do about it? His true qi was exhausted. This joke wasn't funny at all. He was just dealing with a few trash transcendent first-layer cultivators. He didn't even use 30% of his true qi. What's more, after he reached the transcendent realm, the mountain river martial spirit's true qi devouring effect was even stronger. There was no need to stop to recover. On the contrary, the more he fought, the faster he recovered. The more enemies there were, the faster he recovered. I'll give you a chance to kill me. Martial Dao Law activate. The price was to stand still and be attacked by the opponent. If the opponent couldn't pierce his body, he had to take his own attack. Because Ling Xiao's understanding of martial Dao law wasn't thorough enough, he only tried it briefly and didn't dare to use it too often. Lu Xing didn't know what Ling Xiao was thinking. His long sword had already pierced Ling Xiao's body. Kacha! There wasn't the feeling of piercing through the body. Instead, there was the sound of the long sword breaking. How can this be? My long sword is a mortal-grade artifact. Is this guy's body harder than a mortal-grade artifact? How could he know that Ling Xiao's body was so strong that even a treasure-grade artifact couldn't pierce it, let alone a mortal-grade artifact? Lu Xing was so surprised that he hurriedly turned around and retreated, fearing that he would be caught by Ling Xiao. However, Ling Xiao just looked at him contemptuously and didn't have the slightest intention to make a move. The martial Dao law had been successfully activated. He didn't need to make a move at all. Lu Xing, who had already stood still, suddenly screamed as a tragic wound appeared on his body. He knew very well that it was caused by his sword move, but even until his death he didn't understand why. Why was he injured when Ling Xiao didn't make a move? And it was his own sword move that injured him. Chapter 343. The martial Dao law pursued a kind of balance, a balance under the profound world law. The better the effect of the law, the greater the price to pay. Although there might be some exceptions in the process, it was basically balanced. It was just that Ling Xiao could choose a law that was more beneficial to him. This brat knows demonic techniques run. There's no more chance. I have to inform the experts of the Sword King sect. Only the Sword King sect can send people to deal with him and kill him. When Wan Ben saw Lu Xing's inexplicable death, an unprecedented fear arose in his heart. He did not want to stay here any longer. He wanted to escape, no matter what. As for whether or not he could escape, he did not think about it anymore. There was only one thought in his mind. Run. Jiawu, let's go too. This Ling Xiao is no longer human. He's a devil, a demon. Zhu Hua kept retreating. Her original thoughts of attacking had already disappeared. The current her was the same as Wan Ben, only thinking of running for her life. Run. This was the thought of all the warriors attacking the divine sword sect. How could he possibly win a battle against a demonic creature? Since you're here, why leave? Ling Xiao charged into the crowd expressionlessly. When Wan Ben's army came, there were more than 10,000 people. But now there were only 1,000 people left. He was like a ferocious beast, reaping lives in the crowd. The disciples of the divine sword sect also reacted. They were very clear that if they let one person go, it could bring about the destruction of the divine sword sect. They could not let any of these people go. They had to kill them all. You can't kill me. I'm an official of the sacred dynasty. If you kill me, you'll become an enemy of the sacred dynasty. Wan Ben's army that had no fighting spirit was destroyed in an instant. Ling Xiao killed Zhu Hua and Jiawu and captured Wan Ben alive. The rest were left to the disciples of the divine sword sect to deal with. Protecting the divine sword sect was their duty. Wan Ben was captured alive by Ling Xiao. His trembling body kept letting out mournful cries. He used the human clan's sacred dynasty to threaten Ling Xiao. Humph! After you die, the sacred dynasty of the human race will soon support General Lindsay. You can rest in peace. Ling Xiao slapped Wan Ben to death and took his martial spirit. The war was finally over, and the next step was to take care of the funeral. The Tianfeng city was basically the territory of the divine sword sect. The residents of the Tianfeng city could be said to be in the same boat as the divine sword sect. If someone were to speak of what happened today, then the entire Tianfeng city would suffer a calamity. Therefore, the possibility of this happening was minuscule. However, just in case, Ling Xiao spent another day to set up a concealment array for the divine sword sect. Combined with the law of martial Dao As long as the Divine Sword sect did not take the initiative to attack, outsiders would not be able to find them. The price was that the upper echelons of the Divine Sword sect could not give the order to attack the enemy. The number of Divine Sword sect disciples that attacked without permission did not exceed 100. As long as they did not give the order to attack, and the number of Divine Sword sect disciples who attacked without permission did not exceed 100, the Divine Sword sect's concealment array would not be broken. In other words, as long as they didn't attack, the formation was almost invincible. Even a formation expert who specialized in breaking formations would not be able to break this formation, unless someone was able to go against the law of the profound world. After doing all these, Ling Xiao headed to Sky Cloud City to raid Wan Ben's old home. This fellow was definitely the richest man in the White Cloud province. The amount of gold he owned was more than 100 million taels, and the amount of silver was more than 1 billion. He had a wide array of martial arts below gold grade, which was 100 times more than the Divine Sword sect's original martial arts. He also had close to 1,000 pieces of common grade artifacts, and close to 10,000 pieces of lower grade spirit stones. Other than that, there was a large amount of top grade pills from the secular world, although it was not enough to enter the eyes of the sect practitioners. But to the secular practitioners, it was too precious. Ling Xiao took away 5,000 pieces of the 10,000 pieces of lower-grade spirit stones as the funds to purchase the pill refining ingredients. The rest of the items were prepared to be left for the Divine Sword sect. To him, the Divine Sword sect had already become his home, and it was a place that he had always been concerned about. Moreover, after this incident, Ling Xiao's position in the Divine Sword sect had also changed. He was no longer the Grand Elder, but the Grand Sect Master. He had more power than the Sect Master and could decide the life and death of everyone in the sect. The current Sect Master was only helping him to manage the Divine Sword sect. Just as he was about to take Wan Ben's things and leave, he suddenly felt 3 powerful auras in the depths of the governor's mansion. There should be a secret room there. He followed the sound and walked over. There was indeed a secret room, and the door of the secret room was actually open. There were 3 people sitting inside, 2 men and 1 woman, all of whom were very young. At this moment, they were bored to death as they flipped through the books that Wan Ben had hidden in the secret room. Other than some information and stories, there were actually several gold grade entry level martial arts. This Wan Ben was really ambitious. He did not know where he got so many gold grade entry level martial arts. Who? Ling Xiao did not deliberately hide his aura, so when he walked to the door of the secret room, he was discovered by the 3 people. Who are you to Wan Ben? Seeing that Ling Xiao did not speak, the 3 people asked again. Ling Xiao noticed that these 3 people were also disciples of the Sword King sect, and their strength was stronger than the previous Sword King sect disciples. The strongest one was already at the peak of the 2nd layer transcendent realm, while the other 2 were at the early 2nd layer transcendent realm. We're asking you a question, lowly peasant. The woman looked at Ling Xiao with a condescending look, as if Ling Xiao was only worthy of kneeling on the ground in front of her. The 12 great sects were related to the human race's sacred dynasty, and the current upper echelons of the sects were basically nobles of the human race's sacred dynasty. They regarded the cultivators of the secular world as lowly peasants, as if it was only natural. However, Ling Xiao did not buy it. He looked at the 3 people indifferently and said, "This is Governor Bai Yun's mansion. Why are the 3 of you here?" How can Wan Ben's subordinates be so unruly? You dare to question us, are you worthy? Even if Wan Ben were here in person, he wouldn't dare. One of the long-haired men coldly snorted. Just because Wan Ben doesn't dare doesn't mean I don't dare. Ling Xiao was not sure if the 3 of them already knew about the Tianfeng city, so he did not want to let them leave. How dare you? Why isn't that dog Wan Ben back yet? He brought a few of us junior brothers and sisters to annihilate the Divine Sword sect. Does that little sect need that much time? One of the short-haired men slammed the table fiercely, and the table made of blue stone instantly turned into dust. Hearing this, Ling Xiao was sure. These three people definitely knew about the Tianfeng city, so they absolutely could not be let go. He slowly pulled out his ice dragon sword. This brat actually has a treasure-grade sword. Senior brother, I don't have such a good sword yet. The three people from the Sword King sect, perhaps because of their arrogance, did not realize that Ling Xiao would attack them. Chapter 344. Did you hear that, kid? Hand over the ice dragon sword. The long-haired man shouted sternly. It's best if you move faster. This level of artifact will bring you a fatal disaster. As the saying goes, an ordinary man is innocent, but treasures make him guilty. I think you understand that, right? The short-haired man also laughed. Brat, I don't care where you come from or what you want to do with your sword. It's best if you don't act rashly. Quickly hand over the treasure sword and we won't pursue your mistakes. Hee, did you hear that, lowly commoner? As long as you are willing to hand over this treasure sword, then this lady will reluctantly let you be a follower. In the future, your family will be protected by our Sword King sect. The girl also said with a smile, Why aren't you hurrying up? Do you want us to destroy you and then kill your entire family before you become obedient? The long-haired man said coldly, My junior sister is the granddaughter of the Sword King sect's elder. To be his disciple is a blessing accumulated from 8 lifetimes. Forget about kowtowing and thanking us. Quickly hand over the things and help us make a trip to Tianfeng City to see how the situation is over there. In the eyes of these 3 Sword King sect disciples, Wan Ben was just an insignificant ant. And Ling Xiao was just Wan Ben's lackey, so he was insignificant. Therefore, their words were filled with arrogance, completely not considering what the person standing in front of them was thinking. Perhaps they wouldn't care at all. Who would care about an ant that could be trampled to death at any time? In their opinion, as long as they announced the name of the Sword King sect, they would be able to scare the cultivators of the secular world to the point of not daring to move. Not to mention, the 3 of them were all at the 2nd level of the transcendent realm. In the secular world, they were absolute gods. Hee, you guys are really arrogant. The disciples of the 12 sects are so unbridled. Aren't you afraid of kicking an iron plate? Ling Xiao smiled slightly and said, Since you guys want to die so much, I'll fulfill your wish. These 3 idiots actually dared to let him hold the ice dragon sword in his hand without any precautions. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? Ling Xiao's feet moved, and the ice dragon sword was pushed forward. A head had already fallen to the ground. I think the heads of the Sword King sect disciples are not as hard as they think. How are you guys more noble than others? You actually killed my senior brother. The female disciple shrieked. The person Ling Xiao killed was the long-haired man. His cultivation was at the early stage of Transcendent 2nd stage. Ling Xiao had only launched a sneak attack, not even using any martial skills, and killed him with a single sword strike. That's right. Not only will I kill him, but I'll also kill all of you. Ling Xiao shook his sword and rushed forward again. But this time it wouldn't be so easy. After all, 2nd layer Transcendent Realm cultivators weren't easy to deal with. If Ling Xiao wanted to kill them, he could only do so through a sneak attack. Junior sister, don't worry. Watch me kill him to avenge senior brother. The short-haired man's cultivation was the strongest of the 3, reaching the peak of the 2nd layer of the Transcendent Realm. He would definitely not be easy to deal with. This person held 2 broken swords in his hands. Ruthless aura surged out, and then he welcomed Ling Xiao's ice dragon sword. I don't care who you are. Since you dared to kill a disciple of my Sword King sect, I'll definitely tear you into pieces and wipe out your family. Asterisk dang. Asterisk the short-haired man blocked Ling Xiao's attack with a broken sword in his hand. Then, The other broken sword suddenly shot out like a poisonous snake, and the sword light flickered. The sound of water, freezing, could be heard. In an instant, a bone-chilling cold enveloped the entire room. Sword King Sek's rare gold grade martial art, frozen ice sword style. 3 feet of ice. Ling Xiao could feel that this frozen ice sword style was on the same level as the Raging Flame sword style he had encountered before. However, in the hands of this person, it was obviously much more powerful than the Raging Flame sword style. The moment the broken sword stabbed out, it actually gave off the feeling of winter, as if the sky was covered in ice and snow. This sword strike was indeed sharp, instantly breaking through Ling Xiao's protective true qi, and like an ice snake, it seemed to want to pierce through Ling Xiao's throat. A peak second layer transcendent realm cultivator really isn't easy to deal with. Ling Xiao couldn't help secretly becoming cautious. This person wasn't one of the transcendent realm cultivators he had encountered before, and he wasn't the slightest bit careless. He absolutely couldn't underestimate his opponent, otherwise he would suffer the same fate as the long-haired man. Yang Kai didn't retreat, instead drawing out his other floating snow sword and blocking the short-haired man's sword. In that instant, an icy chill passed through the drifting snow sword and entered his body. It seeped into his meridians like an icy, venomous snake burrowing into his blood vessels. This kind of feeling was really uncomfortable. Die, ignorant, lowly commoner, the short-haired man sneered coldly. He had already seen Ling Xiao's entire body freeze, as if he had turned into an ice sculpture. Those who had fought him before, once they became like this, they would die without a doubt. There was no chance of survival. Hee, senior brother, you can kill him, but don't break the genuine grade artifact sword. The junior sister seemed to have forgotten about the long-haired man's death. Her face filled with excitement. Sure enough, she was also someone who viewed human life as worthless. In her eyes, Ling Xiao was already a dead man. She didn't even bother to look at him, instead focusing on Ling Xiao's ice dragon sword. The reason why Ling Xiao did not counterattack was because he suddenly realized that this cold sword qi was actually very compatible with the golden lotus true essence in his body. It was constantly fusing with the golden lotus true essence, increasing his cultivation base and true essence quality. This made him a little reluctant to end the battle. However, the short-haired man thought that Ling Xiao was dead, so he stopped injecting his true qi and instead raised his foot to kick the frozen Ling Xiao. What a pity! Ling Xiao couldn't help shaking his head. Just a little bit more, and his cultivation would have broken through to the early second layer of the transcendent realm. Asterisk Hong Ka. Asterisk, just as the short-haired man's foot was about to kick him, Ling Xiao lightly shook his body and the ice around him instantly disappeared, as if it had been evaporated by the high temperature. At the same time, he pushed the ice dragon, sword forward. Asterisk Pucci. Asterisk, the short-haired man was completely caught off guard and hurriedly tried to dodge, but he was still stabbed in the heart by Ling Xiao's sword, causing blood to spurt from his mouth, and he was clearly on the verge of death. Even if he was a transcendent realm cultivator, if he didn't cultivate a special defensive martial art, as long as his neck was cut off or his heart was crushed, he would die without a doubt. Ah, how did you? The short-haired man was completely dumbfounded by this sudden turn of events. It wasn't until he felt his vitality rapidly drain away and a bone-deep pain spread from his heart that he understood what had happened. He had been hit by a sword and it had been a fatal blow. Junior sister, run. The short-haired man realized before he died that the man in front of him was definitely not a commoner, nor was he one Ben's lackey. This was a terrifying guy, so terrifying that he could take his life at any time. Chapter 345. Don't worry, she won't be able to escape. You definitely won't be alone on the road to hell. Ling Xiao said indifferently before turning around and thrusting his sword at the female disciple. Don't kill me. The woman who had been extremely arrogant just a moment ago crumbled instantly. Although this girl was delicate and charming, like a pear blossom in the rain. It was a pity that she was already on Ling Xiao's death list. From the moment she said that she wanted to treat Ling Xiao as a slave follower, she was destined to die. She paid a heavy price for her arrogance. Phew! Looking at the 3 disciples of the Sword King sect lying in a pool of blood, Ling Xiao let out a long sigh. It didn't feel good to kill someone. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, he really didn't want to be so ruthless. The 3 people's martial souls were sent into the mountain river world to strengthen the soul of the immemorial golden dragon. The key was that Ling Xiao's standards were high now. He really didn't care about ordinary martial souls. If there really was a special martial soul, he didn't mind taking it for himself. Before burning the 3 corpses, Ling Xiao took the 3 people's storage rings and used his soul power to check them. He couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised, because he was worried that a long night might cause trouble after throwing the 3 storage rings into the mountain river world. He immediately burned the 3 corpses and returned to the Divine Sword Sect. After handing over a large amount of martial arts, silver, low-grade spirit stones, spirit pills, and other things to the Divine Sword Sect, he returned to the Yuehua sect with most of the gold, a large number of inferior-grade spirit stones, a small number of middle-grade spirit stones, and superior-grade spirit stones they got from the Sword King sect disciples, and a martial arts manual that he found on the female disciple. No one knew. No one would care that an outer sect disciple, like him, had suddenly disappeared for a few days. In any case, he had set up a small formation in his cave that would constantly emit his aura. This way, others would mistakenly think that he had been cultivating in his cave. After returning to the Yuehua school, Ling Xiao calmed down and took out the martial arts secret manual that he had obtained from the female disciple of the Sword King sect. Shadow Sword Art. This martial arts secret manual was simply a combination of the shadow cultivation secret technique and the 13 sword shadow, but its grade was much higher. It was actually a top-grade gold rank martial arts. A female disciple actually has such a martial arts secret manual? Could it be that this guy is really the daughter or granddaughter of an elder of the Sword King sect? Ling Xiao couldn't help but stick out his tongue. He had really poked the heavens this time. But fortunately, those people had all cooperated with Wan Ben without permission to deal with the Divine Sword School. Even if the Sword King sect wanted to investigate the Divine Sword School and then investigate him, it would probably take a very long time. To the end teat to toot, to that. This was the case for the quasi-gold grade martial technique, 13 shadow swords. He was actually using a simplified version of the shadow form sword technique. He had abandoned many unnecessary things and turned it into a pure sword move. But the real complete shadow cultivation secret technique was not only sword moves, but also a cultivation secret technique. The secret manual's introduction said that this sword art was a top-grade gold rank martial arts, but there was no limit to the cultivator's cultivation and potential. But the cultivation of this martial arts secret manual was divided into 2 stages. The first stage was shadow transformation, and the second stage was sword art. Only after completing the first stage could the second stage be carried out. The first stage was very similar to the shadow cultivation secret technique. The requirement was to refine a sword soul clone. Then, the sword soul clone would be used to assist the cultivation. Warriors below the heaven realm could refine a maximum of 13 sword soul clones. However, there could only be 2 that could help with cultivation. If there were more than 2, the effect of cultivation would continue to decline. On average, 2 was the most suitable and most efficient cultivation method. Refining a sword soul clone was more troublesome. First, one had to have a sword soul. Next, one had to know how to refine arrays. Finally, one had to have a martial soul clone. Only when all 3 were present could one refine a sword soul clone. Once successfully refined, one could have it forever. After completing the first stage and having 13 sword soul clones, one could carry out the second stage of sword art cultivation. In other words, martial arts. Although the process was very troublesome, Ling Xiao had seen many martial arts requirements. They were not made randomly. There must be a reason for them. Perhaps only after refining 13 sword soul clones could one practice the sword art. Anyway, Ling Xiao now had the Snow Lotus sword art and the divine Hell King fist. Together with the 12 golden lotus arts, it was very terrifying. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to improve his martial skills. The most important thing now was to refine 2 sword soul doppelgangers and cultivate them in place of the shadow cultivation secret technique. This way, his cultivation speed would definitely be much faster than before. Unfortunately, he had obtained this martial arts secret manual a little late. Ling Xiao had used all the sword soul he had obtained to strengthen the soul of the immemorial golden dragon. But it did not matter. It was just a sword soul. He believed that he would be able to get it soon. Thinking of this, he hurried to the Yuehua School's trading market. Almost everything could be bought in the trading market, and martial souls were no exception. With the development of martial arts, martial souls could be implanted from one person's body to another person's body through transplants. However, the martial souls obtained through this method needed a long time to adapt. If possible, no one would be willing to do this. However, although some people were talented in martial arts, they were unable to awaken their martial souls. At this time, it was necessary to do this. There were also some people who felt that their martial souls were not good enough and would use this method. Martial souls could be implanted, but the experts who studied martial souls had tried many times, but they were still unable to let a martial artist have more than 2 martial souls. They came to a conclusion. Only people who were born with 2 or 3 martial souls could do this kind of implantation. However, it was meaningless. Ling Xiao's situation was a little special. He had the mountain river martial soul, so it was not a problem for him to devour multiple martial souls at the same time. However, at this stage, he could not use more than 3 martial souls at the same time. Of course, it was another matter if he used them in rotation. Ling Xiao was already familiar with the sex trading market. He quickly found the stall that sold martial souls. Oh, isn't this the outer sex number 1 junior brother Ling? What's wrong? Looking for me to buy a martial soul? The stall owner was a little disdainful. That was because, although Ling Xiao had become the outer sex number 1 very early, Leng Hao, Zhao Ji, Zhao Xiai, and Dai Yuling had all been promoted to the inner sect in the same batch of disciples. He was still an outer sect disciple. Therefore, there were rumors that Ling Xiao's peak was the outer sex number 1. Even if he was powerful in the outer sect, what was the point? Wasn't he the same as an ant? Ling Xiao didn't care about his disdain. How could a swallow know the ambition of a swan? Chapter 346. Ling Xiao remained in the outer sect and maintained his position as the number 1 outer sect disciple. Therefore, he received more resources than many of the weaker outer sect disciples. Although the outer sect seemed to be a low-level hall in the Yuehua School, the outer sect disciples also wanted to fight for themselves if possible. With Ling Xiao as their treasure, wouldn't they do their best to nurture him? If Ling Xiao could defeat an inner sect disciple, the hall masters and elders of the outer sect would be able to vent their anger. Sometimes the reason for the competition in the sect was that simple. It was purely for the sake of pride and dignity. In addition, if he completed the moon arrival day tower ascension ceremony as an outer sect disciple, he would receive an additional reward. After thinking about it, Ling Xiao felt that he didn't need to rush into the inner sect. His current situation was very good. He could accumulate more strength before going up. In this way, even if he was suppressed by He Suo and the others, he would have the strength to resist. The outer sect was an opportunity for him. At the same time, it was also an umbrella and a treasure trove. Yes, do you have a sword martial spirit here? Ling Xiao asked indifferently. Yes, but I'm afraid you can't afford it. The stall owner saw that Ling Xiao was still so calm in front of him and couldn't help but feel a little unhappy. He was an inner sect disciple. Although he was at the bottom of the inner sect, he thought that he was much more powerful than Ling Xiao, an outer sect disciple. Oh, how many spirit stones! Ling Xiao was still very calm. There was no point in getting angry with this kind of person. 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. Do you have it? The stall owner looked at Ling Xiao disdainfully, as if he was looking at a beggar. He knew that outer sect disciples were poor. It was impossible for them to take out 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. Of course, he couldn't take it out himself. He was only here to look after the stall for the elders. Martial spirits were clearly priced. Although there would be fluctuations, the fluctuation would not exceed 100 low-grade spirit stones. A complete transparent martial spirit was priced at 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. In fact, if it was just buying martial spirits, it wasn't too expensive. The expensive part was the implantation surgery. It wasn't a problem that could be solved with low-grade spirit stones. It required high-grade spirit stones, and it would be an astronomical number. 2 sword martial spirits. Here are 20,000 low-grade spirit stones. Some time ago, Ling Xiao had earned a lot of low-grade spirit stones by refining pills. In addition to the 5,000 low-grade spirit stones he got from Wan Ben's governor mansion and the 30,000 low-grade spirit stones in the storage rings of the Sword King sect disciples. He now had more than 50,000 low-grade spirit stones. There were about 100 mid-grade spirit stones and 10 high-grade spirit stones, but he didn't dare to use them carelessly. After all, they were too precious. How do you have so many spirit stones? The stall owner almost fell to the ground. He was so shocked that he was dumbfounded. Can't I? Ling Xiao asked indifferently. Sure. The stall owner gritted his teeth as greed flashed in his eyes. He suddenly realized that he might have underestimated the benefits of being number one in the outer sect. Not to mention that this Ling Xiao was also a genius in alchemy. If there's a chance, humph. He thought to himself, after getting the 2 sword martial spirits. Ling Xiao suddenly whispered in the stall owner's ear, "Let me give you a piece of advice. You'd better not have any bad ideas. I can kill Su Ying and Wang Feng, so I can kill you." The stall owner's face suddenly turned pale. He remembered that the death of Su Ying and Wang Feng had made the whole Yuehua school restless. For that matter, the flame deity Wang Han Tianzuan and Yang Danlin fought fiercely. In the end, the law enforcement hall was forced to intervene. In terms of cultivation, he was only a little stronger than Wang Feng and Su Ying. Although he was threatened by an outer sect disciple and felt very humiliated, he knew when to advance and retreat. He didn't want to die. Ha, senior brother. Thank you for your sword martial spirits. Goodbye. Ling Xiao suddenly grinned and returned to his cave residence with the 2 sword martial spirits. The first thing he did after returning to his cave residence was to refine the sword soul doppelganger. The method was described very clearly in the shadow form sword art. There were 3 steps to refining the sword soul doppelganger. He had already completed the first step and possessed 2 sword martial spirits. The second step was to refine an array refining stone called the soul refining stone. The soul refining array was considered a relatively basic array. Ling Xiao naturally knew how to set it up, as he also had an array refining stone on him. If it were someone else, they would probably have to find someone to help them. However, he didn't need to. Although his current array refining technique wasn't advanced enough, no one would dare to say they were first if he said he was second. It could even be said that his ability to refine and set up basic arrays had long surpassed his Yuan Venerate master. As for whether he was better than others, he wasn't too sure. After all, the mystic world was too big and there were many capable people he hadn't met yet. He couldn't arbitrarily assume that he was the strongest. That would be too stupid. After the second step was completed, the last step was left. It required one to possess a martial spirit doppelganger. Ling Xiao could understand this requirement because it was impossible to refine the sword soul doppelganger if one didn't understand the martial spirit doppelganger. The two were basically the same. The specific method was very clear. It was to set up the soul refining array on a sword, and then condense it into the sword soul doppelganger. This sword could be an ordinary sword, a treasure weapon, or even a spirit weapon of a higher grade. The difference was that the better the quality of the treasure sword, the more powerful the sword soul doppelganger would be. Ling Xiao currently possessed 36 Big Dipper flying swords, all of which were fine treasure weapons. There was also the Ice Dragon Sword, which was a treasure weapon. There was also the Drifting Snow Sword, which was a fine treasure weapon. The soul refining array wouldn't prevent the treasure sword from being used as a weapon. It could also allow the treasure sword to develop self-awareness and listen to the martialist's orders to launch self-attacks. Ling Xiao thought about it and decided to use the soul refining array on the Big Dipper flying swords. It could be imagined that when the flying sword was shot out, it would suddenly undergo some kind of special change, and the enemy would probably be unable to guard against it. Unknowingly, Ling Xiao had opened up another kind of pioneering work, allowing the imperial sword technique, which could only be controlled by soul force or true essence, to have self-awareness. Although there were people who had thought of this before and even tried to do so, they were restricted by various conditions and didn't succeed. Ling Xiao had realized what they had thought of but couldn't do. The process of condensing the sword soul doppelganger was simpler than imagined. This was probably because Ling Xiao had the martial spirit doppelganger. In this profound world, there were only a few people who had martial spirit doppelganger, and most of them were above the grotto heaven realm. For someone like Ling Xiao to possess a martial soul avatar at the martial vein realm and interact with it day and night, understanding it to such an extent, it was likely that only the human king in the past 100,000 years could do such a thing. Success! The sword soul doppelganger was clearly more realistic and more specific than the doppelganger condensed by the 13 Shadow transformation. Chapter 347. The sword soul doppelganger could transform into a sword or assume a human form. It could also allow a cultivator's attacks to have special effects depending on their martial spirit. Lathe 2-sword martial spirits Ling Xiao bought were only transparent first stage complete soul martial spirits, so their special effects were very weak. Most martial spirits only had 2 abilities at this stage. One was to strengthen the cultivator's abilities. The other was to assist the cultivator in attacking. Of course, the Mountain River martial spirit was an exception. These 2-sword martial spirits were also the same. One was a speed sword spirit and the other was a strength sword spirit. Respectively, they could increase Ling Xiao's attack speed and attack power by 10%. It didn't sound like much, but if he met an evenly matched opponent, it would be of great help. After condensing the 2-sword soul doppelganger, Ling Xiao immediately stopped using the shadow cultivation secret technique and switched to the shadow transformation sword art. He continued to improve his cultivation. He was currently at the peak of the first layer, Transcendent Realm. The so-called 9th Heavenly Layer Transcendent Realm was completely different from the 9th layer of the Martial Vein Realm. The 9th layer of the Martial Vein Realm was actually to accumulate strength to awaken the 9 martial veins and lay a good foundation. On the other hand, the 9th layer of the Transcendent Realm was a true 9th layer realm, like the 9th layer of the Heaven Realm. Every time a cultivator stepped into a new realm, it was a transformation from their soul to their body. The difference between each realm was much greater than the difference between the 9th layer of the Martial Vein Realm. Because of this, every breakthrough in the 9th layer of the Transcendent Realm was extremely difficult, especially for cultivators with an unstable foundation. It was normal for them to be stuck at the first layer of the Transcendent Realm for the rest of their lives. Grandmaster Bai Yin was very young when he broke through to the Transcendent Realm, only in his 20s, but now he was more than 100 years old and was still stuck at the first layer of the Transcendent Realm. He was the best example of this. This was why Grandmaster Bai Yin had always asked his disciples to lay a good foundation and not bite off more than they could chew. He had a similar experience and was too anxious to succeed. Although he had broken through to the transcendent realm, it would be difficult for him to break through to the second layer of the transcendent realm, let alone the heaven realm. In fact, each of the 9 heavenly layers of the transcendent realm had a specific name in order to make it easier for cultivators to understand what the 9 heavenly layers of the transcendent realm was. The first tier of purification, the second tier of blood reformation, the third tier of orifice clearing, the fourth tier of hardness and gentleness, the fifth tier of divine power, the sixth tier of fusion, the seventh tier of divine valor, the eighth tier of divine transformation, and the ninth tier of divine ability. Among them, the first 3 stages were obviously rebirth. Generally, after a cultivator broke through to the transcendent realm, they had to complete these 3 stages, and each of them was extremely difficult. However, because Ling Xiao cultivated the heavenly dragon golden body and fused with the primordial blood of the primordial golden dragon, Ling Xiao was able to obtain the heavenly dragon golden body. There was also the mutation of the mountain river martial spirit. As a result, as soon as he broke through to the first order transcendent realm, he had already experienced all 3 stages. In other words, for Ling Xiao, the first 3 layers of the transcendent realm basically wouldn't pose any difficulty. All he needed to do was cultivate naturally. From the 4th level onwards, it would gradually become more difficult. Is Ling Xiao here? Suddenly, a voice came from outside the cave. Elder Bai. Ling Xiao was very familiar with this voice. In the outer sect, Elder Bai was one of the people who valued him very much. Moreover, he had helped him a lot. Yes. Ling Xiao stood up and walked out of the cave. Hello, Elder Bai. Do you need something from me? It's like this. The outer sect's main hall master, Heavenly Venerable Wu Go, invites you over. Since joining the sect, Ling Xiao had never seen the hall master of the outer sect's main hall. Heavenly Venerable Wu Go? This title is a bit interesting. Could it be that he's a clean freak? Ling Xiao maliciously guessed. Disciple obeys. Since he planned to stay in the outer sect for a while, he couldn't offend the hall master of the outer sect's main hall. What's more, there should be some good things for him to do this time. After all, he was the outer sect's #1 disciple and was the hope of the outer sect's old seniors. Ling Xiao didn't mind helping these old seniors vent their anger. He also felt that those inner sect people were a bit too cocky. For a long time in the inner sect, only those geniuses who were directly selected by the elder-level experts, such as Lung Hao and Ming Tian, had some privileges, and their status was very high. On the contrary, disciples who were promoted from the outer sect to the inner sect would be looked down upon by these heavens chosen even if they reached the inner sect. This was the sorrow of these disciples. It was also the sorrow of the outer sect. After all, so far, there had never been a disciple who was promoted from the outer sect who could challenge the heavens chosen. Of course, talent was one of the reasons. But the more important thing was that the inner sect disciples who were promoted were very disliked and couldn't get enough resources. Although cultivation wasn't a problem, it couldn't be compared to those heavens chosen. He had heard about these things from Zhao Ji. As members of the imperial family, Zhao Ji and Zhao Xi could clearly feel this discrimination. Their imperial uncle elder also ignored the 2 of them. Instead, he put all his effort into cultivating the heavens chosen that he brought back from the outside. Only Dai Yuling was relatively lucky. Lan Yu only had 1 disciple, and she really treated her like a sister. It was likely that Ling Xiao would have the same experience after entering the inner sect. Therefore, he planned to give this group of heavens chosen a show of strength before entering. He didn't like words like chance and opportunity. He felt that it was best to control his own fate in his own hands. Otherwise, even if the opportunity came, he wouldn't be able to grasp it. He was now methodically proceeding according to his plan. If the outer sect's hall master, Heavenly Sovereign Wu Go asked him to do something that happened to coincide with his plan. Then he would naturally do his best to complete it. If it ran in the opposite direction, then he would simply deal with it casually. There was no need to be so serious. Ling Xiao, I've called you here today to tell you something, Ling Xiao said. Heavenly Sovereign Wu Go's white robes were really clean and spotless. This guy definitely had mysophobia. Looking at his subordinates, they were at least 10 meters away from him for fear of making him feel uncomfortable. Ling Xiao's judgment was right. Hall Master, if you have something to tell me, this disciple will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Ling Xiao cupped his hands and said, these pleasantries still needed to be said. Ha ha ha, it's good that you have such intentions. In fact, this is also a rare opportunity for you, Heavenly Sovereign Wu Go said. You should know that in order to help the outer sect disciples advance to the inner sect as soon as possible, every month, the top 3 outer sect disciples will be invited to the inner sect to participate in joint training for a period of time. This period of time may be long or short. You will live and cultivate with the inner sect disciples, but the longest period of time will not exceed 3 months. Hall Master, your words are too pleasant to hear. What do you mean by helping the outer sect disciples advance? This is simply giving confidence to those inner sect disciples. Chapter 348. Elder Bai sighed and said, Ling Xiao, listen up. Because the inner sect disciples are not allowed to interfere with the outer sect disciples, the inner sect disciples are not allowed to spar with the outer sect disciples. However, during the joint training, this rule does not exist. Those punching bags of the inner sect will use the outer sect disciples as a punching bag to vent their anger. If they want to use me as a punching bag, it depends on whether they have the ability to do so. Ling Xiao smiled confidently. Good. I knew you would have no problem. Then prepare a little. Tomorrow, bring my Wu Go token and the invitation letter from the inner sect and head to the inner sect for the joint training with Xiao Yan and Lin Feng. Heavenly Sovereign Wu Go was very satisfied with Ling Xiao's attitude. How could the number 1 outer sect disciple not have such courage? He did not expect Ling Xiao to have a brilliant result when he went to the inner sect for the joint training. But as long as he did not lose to those punching bags of the outer sect disciples, it would be fine. As for Jian Xing and Lin Feng, they were currently ranked 2nd and 3rd in the outer sect disciples, and were both half-step masters. Ling Xiao had seen Jian Xing before. He had defeated this person's arrogance with a single finger at the foreign tower. Later, Jian Xing lost to Zhao Ji in the competition. After Zhao Ji was promoted to the inner sect disciple, Jian Xing returned to 2nd place. The other disciple, Lin Feng, was already 26 years old and had always been ranked 4th in the outer sect. However, due to continuous promotions, he was now ranked 3rd in the outer sect. Ling Xiao was not very familiar with these 2 people, but their relationship was not bad. After all, almost all the outer sect disciples had received guidance from Ling Xiao, and the 2 of them were no exception. Now that the 2 of them were on the verge of a breakthrough, if they could achieve better results in this joint training, then promotion should not be a problem. Of course, to them, almost all the inner sect geniuses were their enemies. Basically, everyone wanted to trample on them to boost their self-confidence. Ling Xiao did not know how many geniuses there were in the inner sect. However, Lan Yu, Ming Tian, and Leng Hao were all heaven's favored ones. He believed that there would be many people who had the same talent as them. He Sua, Zhao Ji, and the others were slightly inferior, but even then they were absolutely able to firmly crush the outer court disciples like Jian Xing and Lin Feng. That was definitely a place where heroes gathered. Ling Xiao also wanted to take this opportunity to learn more about these geniuses in order to prepare for the moon arrival, festival, tower ascension ceremony. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Although Ling Xiao was confident, he was not arrogant. Only by having a better understanding of the opponent would one be able to achieve victory. After leaving the outer court main hall, Ling Xiao once again entered a state of cultivation. The success of the sword soul doppelganger had greatly increased his cultivation speed. Now that he was about to participate in the inner sex joint training, he had to continue increasing his strength so that he wouldn't lose face when he went to the outer sect. If he thought about it carefully, there should be quite a number of people in the inner sect who were waiting to make trouble for him. With every increase in strength, the chances of losing face would naturally decrease. When he left the outer court main hall, it was still early in the morning. When Ling Xiao opened his eyes from cultivation, the moon was already high in the sky. Breakthrough. The process of breaking through from the peak Transcendent Realm first layer to the early Transcendent Realm second layer was simply too easy for him. It was so easy that he couldn't believe it. This was probably because he had a good foundation. When he was in the Martial Vein Realm, he had raised all 3 potentials to the peak of the Martial Vein Realm. After breaking through, he had already completed the 3 stages of marrow cleansing, blood exchanging, and orifice opening. It was reasonable for his cultivation to advance so quickly. At this moment, he had already left Xiao Ji, Zhao Xi, Dai Yuling, and the others far behind. Even peerless geniuses like Ming Tian and Lung Hao could only be on par with him. One had to know that for an ordinary cultivator to break through from the Transcendent Realm first layer to the Transcendent Realm second layer, it would take them a lifetime to do so. Even a genius cultivator with an immortal grade artifact body would probably take a few months to break through. A divine grade artifact body might take a shorter time, but it still wouldn't be shorter than a month. However, Ling Xiao's situation was too special. It only took him a few days to break through from the Transcendent Realm first layer to the Transcendent Realm second layer. After breaking through to the early Transcendent Realm second layer, Ling Xiao handed over the task of consolidating his cultivation to one of his sword soul doppelgangers. The other sword soul doppelganger was responsible for cultivating various gold grade entry level martial arts to upgrade the levels of the Cloud Dragon Divine Leap and the 9 Demons Divine Art. Now that he was already in the second layer of the Transcendent Realm, the Cloud Dragon Divine Leap obviously couldn't keep up with his cultivation and needed to be upgraded. The 9 Demons Divine Art was the same. At its current level, it was no longer enough. In any case, he had obtained a large number of gold-grade entry-level martial arts from the Yuehua School's Moonflower Pavilion, Wan Ben's Governor's Mansion, and the Sword King sect's disciples. He had enough materials to upgrade these 2 secret arts. This was especially true for movement techniques, which were imperative and could not be delayed in the slightest. Instead of cultivating, Yang Kai began to sort out all the strength he currently possessed. The Heavenly Dragon Golden Body was a high-grade, gold-grade martial art. Upon reaching the 5th level, one would be reborn and possess the complete Heavenly Dragon's blood. They would no longer be mortal and could be reborn from a single drop of blood. Of course, being reborn from a single drop of blood didn't mean being invincible. After all, if one was directly blasted to smithereens by a powerful force, one could forget about being reborn from a single drop of blood. However, at least in the Transcendent Realm, if someone wanted to kill him, it wouldn't be easy. Yang Kai could rely solely on his bloodline and physical strength to suppress cultivators below the first layer of the Transcendent Realm without even using his true chi. The 12 Golden Lotus Arts was labeled as a rare gold grade entry level martial art, but it was suspected to be a peak gold grade entry level martial art or even stronger. Currently, it was at the 3rd layer, allowing one to grasp the power of wind, thunder, and rain. So far, there were very few cultivators who could cultivate the 12 Golden Lotus Arts to the 3rd layer in the Transcendent Realm. The Snow Lotus Sword Arts was a rare gold grade entry level martial art with a total of 5 forms. The first 4 forms had been perfectly grasped, while the 5th, Ice Storm, had been comprehended to about 60%. The 5th form was the culmination of the Grand Accomplishment stage, and its power was almost the sum of the first 4 forms. Once it was displayed, it would be extremely terrifying. This was only when used alone. If combined with the 12 golden lotus arts, it would be even more terrifying. The Divine Prison King's Fist was a gold grade entry level martial art that had been cultivated to the grand perfection stage and was still in the process of being comprehended. Ling Xiao's goal was to cultivate it to the perfection stage. That way, the power of this fist technique would not lose to a rare gold grade entry level martial art. The grand perfection stage of the Imperial Sword Technique Bronze Scroll could be used to display the Heavenly Dipper Sword Array, which was best used to trap and kill enemies or to launch sneak attacks. The Shadow Transforming Sword Art was a gold grade entry level martial art that was divided into 2 stages. The first stage required one to condense 13 sword soul doppelgangers. Chapter 349. Other than the Cloud Dragon Divine Journey and the 9 Demons Divine Art, the rest of the martial arts had basically been eliminated. With Ling Xiao's advancement to the Transcendent Realm, those martial arts were basically useless. Although he was reluctant, since he wanted to continue advancing, he had to give up something. There was nothing he could do about it. The next morning, Ling Xiao recalled the Sword Soul Doppelganger and left the cave mansion. "Good morning, Senior Brother Ling." Jian Xing and Lin Feng were already waiting outside. The 2 of them were very respectful to him, completely treating him as their backbone, or rather their boss. They must have heard of the painful experience of the joint training between the outer and inner sect disciples. Whether they could avoid losing face or not depended on Ling Xiao. Anyway, although the 2 of them were not weak compared to the inner sect disciples, they were still too far away. After all, in the inner sect, the weakest cultivation was at the early stage of the Transcendent Realm, and the 2 of them were only half-step masters. The 2 of them looked at Ling Xiao and felt a little surprised. Ling Xiao was clearly only a half-step master, but the aura he exuded was not something the 2 of them could compare to. Of course, they did not know that Ling Xiao's confidence and calmness came from his confidence in his own strength. One had to know that although he was only a half-step master, his cultivation was actually at the early stage of the 2nd Transcendent Realm. Of course, this strong confidence was not simply because of his cultivation. In addition to his cultivation, he had 2 more terrifying trump cards, one of which was the Mountain and River Martial Spirit. He had not really used the Mountain and River Martial Spirit in actual combat. It was basically used as a support, such as analyzing and seeing through the opponent's attacks and flaws in martial arts. When he was in the Dragon Submission Mountain Range, he had tried to summon the Mountain and River Martial Spirit. The terrifying aura in an instant was enough to shake the world. It could even swallow the immemorial Golden Dragon directly. One had to know that the immemorial Golden Dragon's roar caused the laws of the sealed world to change, alarming countless masters in the sealed world. The Mountain and River Martial Spirit's aura was even more terrifying than the immemorial Golden Dragon. Even Grotto Heaven Realm masters could not detect its existence. The other trump card was naturally the power of the primordial Golden Dragon. In his human form, he could draw out a trace of the ancient Golden Dragon's power, and his strength would increase by about 50%. In his human dragon form, he could use even more desolate power, and his strength would at least double. In the form of the primordial Golden Dragon, he could use an even greater amount of desolation energy, increasing his strength by at least 10 times. However, due to the huge consumption and the heavy burden on the body, this form could only be maintained for a maximum of 10 breaths. It happened in an instant. However, it was naturally best to use it as a sure-kill skill. He wouldn't use such a thing easily, and he didn't need it unless his life was in danger. After all, once he used the primordial Golden Dragon form, the news of him reviving the primordial behemoth would be leaked. That would bring him a lot of trouble. Let's go to the inner court main hall." Ling Xiao took a deep breath. Going to the inner sanctum main hall as an outer sanctum disciple was always a subtle feeling. News of the joint training spread like wildfire in the inner court. In fact, this kind of thing couldn't be hidden. After all, This was the usual practice of the Yuehua school. Anyone who was even a little bit familiar with the Yuehua school would be able to guess it. Hee, I heard that among the participants this time, one of them can even kill a transcendent realm first-layer cultivator. That's right, I think his name is Ling Xiao. The flame deity's 2 disciples, Su Ying and Wang Feng, were killed by him. Where did this kid come from? How could he be so terrifying? In this joint training, Ling Xiao was the most talked about person among the inner disciples. After all, in the eyes of many inner court disciples, outer court disciples were ants. Looking at the entire history of the Yuehua school, although there had been outer court top 3 who had defeated inner court disciples before. However, there had never been a case like Ling Xiao killing 2 inner court disciples. Moreover, even if outer court disciples had defeated inner court disciples before, those inner court disciples were trash who were about to be eliminated. What's more, during the battle, they would only win with 1 or half a move. But what about Ling Xiao? Rumor had it that he only used 2 moves to kill 2 inner court disciples. Moreover, the 2 of them were genius-level inner court disciples, especially Su Ying, who had been accepted as a core disciple by the flame deity. That was the same treatment as Ming Tian and Lung Hao. They died just like that. No wonder the flame deity didn't want to accept his identity and killed Ling Xiao himself. You only know one thing and don't know the other. Don't listen to the rumors outside. In fact, as far as I know, the one who killed Su Ying and Wang Feng was someone else, and it was a Heaven Realm Master. Could it be Wang Han Tianzuan? If that's the case, it makes sense. Shoo, it's good that you know. Don't talk nonsense or you'll be killed. If I knew it, how could a mere outer court disciple kill 2 genius-level inner court disciples so easily? It turns out that there's something fishy. When this kid comes to participate in the joint training, we have to take good care of him. He. In the inner court, apart from Zhao Ji, Lan Yu, and Dai Yuling, there was almost no one who liked Ling Xiao. Perhaps it was because Ling Xiao's performance in the outer court was too outstanding, or perhaps it was because Ling Xiao killed inner court disciples Su Ying and Wang Feng. Jealousy, envy, displeasure, resentment, there were probably all kinds of feelings. Ling Xiao hadn't entered the inner court yet. Of course, he wouldn't know these people's discussions. He was now walking on the way to the inner court main hall. Jian Xing and Lin Feng, who were on both sides, looked solemn and worried. Only he had joy on his face, as if there was something fun waiting for him to do. Wasn't it fun to train with inner court disciples? Of course, he was happy. The inner court main hall could also be said to be the entire core area of the Yuehua school. The spirit qi here was much richer than in the outer court main hall. However, the closer they got to the inner court main hall, the more powerful the aura could be felt. Whether it was intentional or not, these powerful auras seemed to be attacking Ling Xiao, Jian Xing, and Lin Feng at the same time. Although there was no murderous intent, it was just pressure. However, to the 3 outer sect disciples, this was absolutely a calamity. It was said that there were once 3 outer court disciples who broke down on the spot because of this terrifying pressure and chose to commit suicide. There were even disciples who went crazy. Later on, the Yuehua school made a rule that no one was allowed to hurt the outer court disciples who came for the joint training in this way. However, there were always some people who dared to do things that went against the sect rules because they had someone backing them up. Jian Xing and Lin Feng's faces suddenly turned pale. Their legs seemed to be filled with lead, and they couldn't move at all. Their foreheads were dripping with sweat as if they were suffering from a serious illness. Ling Xiao smiled and waved his hand. Chapter 350. Many thanks, Senior Brother Ling. Jian Xing and Lin Feng suddenly felt much better. That huge pressure from before was actually gone. At this moment, they felt more and more that Ling Xiao was mysterious and powerful. They couldn't help but admire him in their hearts. Aim all of them at Ling Xiao. He dares to meddle in other people's business. Somewhere in the inner sect, someone coldly snorted. Yes, Senior Brother. A total of 12 Transcendent Realm First Layer to Second Layer Transcendent Realm Inner Sect disciples simultaneously mobilized their soul force and blasted it at Ling Xiao. "You're courting death." Ling Xiao frowned slightly and counterattacked with several times the strength of his soul force. Ah, 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 asterisk, pung, 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 asterisk the dozen or so inner sect disciples all screamed and vomited blood as they fell to the ground. They were horrified to find that the combined soul force of 12 or so people was not as strong as Ling Xiao's soul force. They were all cultivators who reached the transcendent realm with their soul potential. Quick, tell the Soul Society that this Ling Xiao is not to be trifled with. In the inner sect, it was normal to form factions. The Soul Society was one of them. It was a small organization in the inner sect. All of its members were cultivators who reached the transcendent realm with their soul potential. Naturally, they banded together to fight for more benefits and obtain more benefits from the sect's missions. Ling Xiao had not even entered the inner sect, but he had already shown his strength to the Soul Society. His terrifying soul force made these people panic. The other party stopped their soul attack, and Ling Xiao did not continue to pursue. It was not an irreconcilable enmity. He would just teach them a lesson. As long as they did not do it again, he was still very magnanimous. The three of them continued to move forward. "Look, the Moonlight Pagoda is getting clearer." Jianxing's voice sounded. Ling Xiao looked up. Sure enough, the Moonlight Pagoda was getting closer and closer. This pagoda was actually standing in the inner sect. He could feel that the ancient aura from the Moonlight Pagoda made the immemorial golden dragon in the mountain river world a little unhappy. The guy actually slowly opened his eyes. It seemed like the primordial beasts and the primordial humans were like fire and water. The Moonlight Pagoda was located in the center of the inner sanctum. The strange thing was that regardless of whether it was day or night, if you stood near the Moonlight Pagoda, you would see the night sky and stars. Now that they were closer, Ling Xiao was surprised to see that the entire sky seemed to revolve around the pagoda. Those stars seemed to be within his reach. The entire pagoda emitted an ancient and majestic aura, causing others to not dare to offend it. Just how powerful were the ancient martial artists? They were actually able to change the day and night in this space and make the stars revolve around the pagoda. Jianxing shouted excitedly. In fact, he wasn't the only one who was excited. Ling Xiao was also excited and shocked. Compared to such a super powerful being, his current strength was nothing. In fact, it was not even worth mentioning. The inner sect main hall was near the Moonlight Pagoda, so it was very easy to find. Although the main hall was built very luxuriously, it was still very grand. But next to the Moonlight Pagoda, it was not even worth mentioning. "Stop! What are you three doing?" This was simply asking the obvious. In the Yuehua school, the uniforms of the inner and outer disciples were completely different. It was very clear at a glance. The most obvious difference was the shape of the moon. The moon on the outer disciples' clothes was only a crescent moon. The moon on the inner disciples' clothes was a half moon. Above the inner sect disciples, there were still the 10 core disciples of the sect. These 10 people were the true monstrous geniuses, because their cultivation was above the 7th level of the transcendent realm, and they were all under the age of 30. The flame deity used to be the number 1 core disciple, but later on, when he was over 30, he retired from the ranks of the core disciples and became an inner sect deacon. Then he advanced to the celestial realm and became an inner sect elder. It could be said that everything was smooth sailing. These top 10 core disciples were all candidates for the successor of the Yuehua school's headmaster. The one ranked first was called the Young Sect Master. This was also the reason why the flame deity was fully trained. He was the Young Sect Master of the previous batch of core disciples. Other sects did not know, but Yuehua school was like this. Even the son or daughter of the headmaster was not qualified to be called the Young Sect Master. Of course, it was just a title. It could be replaced, or it could be given up by someone. After all, not everyone wanted the position of headmaster. The higher one climbed, the bigger and more exciting the world would be. At that time, the Yuehua school would not be worth mentioning in their eyes. For example, Lan Yu was ranked second among the top 10 core disciples, but she had no interest in the headmaster's position. If the guards of the inner sect headquarters saw a core disciple, they would immediately kneel down and lick their shoes clean. But when they saw Ling Xiao, Jian Xing, and Lin Feng, 3 outer disciples, their eyes and noses were not eyes and eyes. We are outer disciples who are here to participate in the inner sect joint training. I am Ling Xiao. I am Jian Xing. I am Lin Feng. The 3 of them introduced themselves. There was no need to be calculative with a gatekeeper. Besides, other than Ling Xiao, the other 2 were indeed no match for this gatekeeper. So it's you. Not bad, not bad. Your bodies are quite sturdy. Even if you are beaten, you can last a few rounds. Go in. After the guard checked the 3's invitation letter and unsullied token, he chose to let them pass. Although he was an inner sect disciple, he did not dare to mess around with an outer sect disciple who held an unsullied token. Otherwise, he would not be able to keep his life if he caused trouble for Heavenly Sovereign Wu Go. Just now, he had only taken advantage of them with his mouth. After entering the inner sect headquarters, there was naturally an inner sect deacon in charge of receiving the 3 of them. Then, each of them was given a temporary inner sect token. After the inner sect joint training, they still had to return it. Of course, they did not change their clothes. So when they stood in the inner sect headquarters, compared to those gorgeously dressed inner sect disciples, they simply looked like 3 servants. Enough. From today onwards, the 3 of you will temporarily enter the inner sect to participate in the joint training. However, it's best to return to the stronghold. In the outer sect, you can call yourselves kings and overlords. Here, you are insects on the ground. Don't offend anyone. Don't provoke anyone. The inner sect deacon looked at the 3 people in front of him with an indifferent expression. He could already imagine the tragic ending of these 3 people. Even the former Wang Feng and Jin Ming were similarly played until they did not have any temper. You could defeat a low-level inner sect disciple, but could you defeat a second one? So in the end, you would still be abused. Moreover, you would be abused even more miserably. Jian Xing had been here before, so when he entered the inner sect headquarters, his entire person became listless, like a flower without water. He was probably played miserably before. Just thinking about it made him feel pitiful. Chapter 351. As outer sect disciples participating in the inner sect joint training, the treatment of Ling Xiao and the others was incomparable to when they were in the outer sect. When they were in the outer sect, they were the best. Each of them had their own cave mansion and didn't have to do any chores. But after participating in the inner sect joint training, the 3 of them had to squeeze under the same roof. And it wasn't a cave mansion, but a wooden house where slaves lived. This clearly told them that outer sect disciples were no different from slaves when they came to the inner sect. When the 3 of them arrived at their residence, they found that Zhao Ji, Zhao Xi, and Dai Yuling were all there. They only knew about the inner sect joint training after entering the inner sect. After all, Zhao Ji and Zhao Xi broke through relatively quickly. As outer sect disciples, they didn't experience this kind of joint training. But in the inner sect, they heard people talk about the cruelty of this joint training. Of course, it was the cruelty of outer sect disciples. The serious thing was that after returning, they would no longer have the confidence to continue cultivating. They waited here purely to tell Ling Xiao these things. After all, whether it was Zhao Ji or Dai Yuling, their relationship with Ling Xiao was quite good. Especially Dai Yuling, they could be said to be life and death friends. I already know what you want to say. Before we left, Elder Bai had already nagged a lot. Before they could speak, Ling Xiao spoke first. You should know my character. If I'm not sure, I won't do something easily. Don't worry about it. TSK, boy, you're quite confident. Suddenly, a very discordant voice joined in. Swordman King. Jian Xing suddenly yelled. What, bitch king? Ling Xiao felt that this world was really full of strange things. There was actually someone with such a name. Cough, cough, senior brother Ling. It's sword as in treasure sword. He and I are from the same sect, but his talent is much better than mine. His cultivation should be at the late first layer of the transcendent realm. Jian Xing coughed dryly and smiled bitterly. Oh, so it's sword as in treasure sword, but I think he's really cheap. Ling Xiao sneered and said, I'm talking to my friend. What's the matter? Don't you know what etiquette is? Ha ha ha! I've long heard that there's a Ling Xiao in the outer sect who is extremely daring. He even dares to kill an inner sect disciple by relying on Wang Han Tianzuan's prestige. Now that I've seen him today, he's indeed arrogant. Swordsman King suddenly laughed. When Sword Star first came to participate in the inner sect joint training, he was also quite arrogant. But after 2 days, he became obedient. Brat, you'd better know your place. Ling Xiao smiled and said, Once, I also met a person called Human King. He seemed to be called King of 10,000 Human Kings, or something. But how can you ordinary people control this name? Do you know what happened to that person? Don't compare me to those trash from the secular world. The Swordsman King roared. Ling Xiao ignored him and continued. I crippled his martial arts and took away his martial spirit. He's now a cripple, but because of that he managed to escape. Because King of 10,000 Human Kings was crippled, he did not follow Wan Ben to Tianfeng City. It could be considered a blessing in disguise as he managed to keep his life. Otherwise, he would have become Ling Xiao's sacrificial lamb. Shut up, the Swordsman King roared. You think I'll shut up just because you told me to? Ling Xiao said indifferently. It seems like you really don't understand. In the past, you were an outer sect disciple. Even if we inner sect disciples were dissatisfied with you, we couldn't do anything about it. But now it's different. You've participated in the inner sect joint training, so you have to spar with us. This is called sparring. The Swordsman King suddenly calmed down. He looked at Ling Xiao and said with a smile, Now, right here, you have to accept my request for a spar. Otherwise, it's against the sect rules. Spar with you? What are the rules? What's the benefit of winning? Ling Xiao came to participate in the joint training, knowing that there would be people looking for trouble. He hated dealing with them one by one. So since the Swordsman King came knocking, he might as well make an example out of him. He'll use the Swordsman King as an example to let the inner sect disciples know that he, Ling Xiao, is not a pushover. However, Ling Xiao did not have much interest in sparring without any benefits. The rules are simple. According to the sect rules, the outer sect disciples who participate in the joint training have to accept at least 3 spars with the inner sect disciples. As long as you're healthy, you can't refuse. If you refuse, you'll be expelled from the sect. This rule is really overbearing. It doesn't even treat the outer sect disciples as human beings. During the battle, you can't take the life of others, and you can't cripple others. If you violate the rules, the outer sect disciples will be sentenced to death. Inner sect disciples will be fined 3 months of salary and face the wall for 3 months. What's the meaning of this rule? If an inner sect disciple kills or cripples an outer sect disciple, they'll only be fined 3 months of salary? Face the wall for 3 months? But an outer sect disciple will be sentenced to death? This Yuehua school really doesn't care about the lives of the outer sect disciples. He suddenly understood why the outer sect disciples have such a low status in the Yuehua school. Perhaps in the eyes of the Yuehua school's higher-ups, the outer sect disciples exist to give the inner sect disciples confidence and a sense of existence. They can be used as sparring partners. They might think that the real geniuses have already been selected by the elders. Even if the rest of the outer sect disciples are all killed, there won't be any loss. It's really cruel and biased. No wonder so many people want to enter the inner sect. Okay, I know the rules. What about the prize? Even though Jian Xing and Lin Feng were about to cry. However, Ling Xiao was still as indifferent as ever. The rules were indeed disadvantageous to him. But with his current level of control over his true essence, it was extremely simple for him to defeat and injure his opponent without killing or severely crippling his opponent. So he was more concerned about the prize. Hee, if you lose, the three of you will be my slaves for the rest of your lives. The swordsman king laughed. Sorry, I can only make the decision for myself. I accept this condition, but I can't make the decision for the other two junior brothers. Ling Xiao shrugged. We also agree. Jian Xing and Lin Feng glanced at each other and suddenly made this bold decision. This wasn't a rash decision. It was made based on their understanding of Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao blocked the soul attacks of several people outside the inner sect main hall. With such strength, he could definitely defeat a peak first-order transcendent realm cultivator. As for what the probability was, the two of them didn't know. Maybe 50%, maybe 60%, but this risk was worth it. Ling Xiao looked at the two of them with some surprise and couldn't help but smile. He then turned to the swordsman king and said, How about this? If you lose, you will let the three of us live in your cave for a few days. How about it? Ha ha ha. You still want to live in my cave? Chapter 352. Just as Ling Xiao and Sword King were about to spar in Volcano Palace, the flame deity's three disciples gathered together to discuss how to avenge their honored master. Novel! Law they couldn't afford to offend Wang Han Tinzuin and Yang Danlin. As such, they blamed Ling Xiao for the flame deity's injuries. When Ling Xiao was in the outer sect, they couldn't do anything to him. But now, Ling Xiao actually dared to participate in the inner sect joint training. This was simply the best opportunity given to them by the heavens. If they missed this opportunity, they might have to wait until Ling Xiao was promoted to the inner sect. However, with Ling Xiao's aptitude, would such a day ever come? He Suo and the others still despised Ling Xiao. They felt that although Ling Xiao's combat strength was strong at this stage, the gap between them would only grow wider and wider due to his lack of aptitude. The flame deity originally only had two disciples in name. One was He Suo, and the other was He Suo's senior brother, Meng Yuan. Later, he accepted Ming Tian, Su Ying, and Wang Feng. Among them, Ming Tian and Su Ying were personally selected true disciples. However, they died at the hands of Ling Xiao in a very short time. Now, the flame deity only had 3 disciples under him. Senior brother Meng Yuan, although only a disciple in name, his talent was not weak, and he was also the strongest. Currently at the 7th heavenly layer of the Transcendent Realm, he was one of the top 10 core disciples, but his ranking was quite low. Next was He Suo. This guy's aptitude was also not bad. 2 months ago, he was still at the 3rd heavenly layer of the Transcendent Realm, but now he was already at the 4th heavenly layer of the Transcendent Realm. Junior brother Ming Tian's talent was the most outstanding. Although he was the latest to join the inner sect, his cultivation speed was astonishing, reaching the peak 2nd layer of the Transcendent Realm in just over 3 months. In addition to them, the flame deity also had 2 powerful subordinates, the lava lizard brothers who guarded Volcano Palace. 9th grade vicious beasts could already assume human form, but they had many lizard characteristics. Their strength was equivalent to a human cultivator at the 9th heavenly layer of the Transcendent Realm, far more terrifying than the flame deity. 3 disciples. Eldest was called Flame Tongue, and the 2nd brother was called Flame Eye. Although they were strong, they were not only that, they were also extremely cruel. Now, these fellows were in the Volcano Palace. On one hand, they were naturally guarding heavenly venerate demon flame. On the other hand, they were discussing matters related to Ling Xiao. They also didn't know why, but a few days ago, Empyrean demon flame had suddenly suffered heavy injuries. Originally, he should have been able to recover in a month, but now he had to drag it out for a year. To heavens, heavenly to heavens, to the heavenly sect to help. I know Ling Xiao very well. Back when he was in Sky Cloud City, he was extremely arrogant and opinionated. I don't find it strange that he dares to take part in the inner disciple joint training. Tian to heavens to Tian to meet. He and Ling Xiao were both Grandmaster by Yun's disciples. Although he didn't know Ling Xiao well, but he knew Ling Xiao's character very well. He had been looking forward to Ling Xiao's promotion to the inner sect so that he could take revenge on Sky Cloud City. However, he did not expect Ling Xiao to be so reckless and come to the inner sect to die so quickly. Moreover, he was an outer sect disciple. Don't underestimate him. This little brat is very strange. Although we spread rumors that Su Ying and Wang Feng were killed by Wang Han Tinzuan, we're very clear that it was him who did it. Sua now had a kind of fear towards Ling Xiao. This kind of fear was mainly towards Ling Xiao's future. He felt that Ling Xiao's development was simply too fast and needed to be restrained. Otherwise, one day in the future, he would end up like Wang Feng and Su Ying. That was why he was so eager to kill Ling Xiao. In the outer sect, he had used various methods to suppress and plot against him, but to no avail. But now there was a chance. Ling Xiao came to take part in the inner sect's joint training and would definitely accept some missions from the inner sect. In this way, he would have a chance to strike. Ha ha ha! Junior brother, you're too useless. Just an outer disciple. Half-step to Grandmaster. Actually scared you to this extent? As a senior brother and a core disciple of Yuehua School, Meng Yuan had always felt that the flamed deity had belittled him, only taking him in as a registered disciple. So this time, he wanted to take this opportunity to let his master know that he was the most outstanding among the 3 disciples. Senior brother, I'm not afraid of him, but this little brat is indeed not easy to deal with. Sua hurriedly said, how's his martial arts talent? Meng Yuan waved his hand and asked, treasure grade. Then what's so special about him? Meng Yuan continued to ask. It said that he's extremely talented in pill refining. Sua thought for a moment and said, right, he seems to have reached the treasure grade in all 3 aspects. Just like that, Meng Yuan looked at Sua in disdain and said, Junior brother, could it be that after you were plotted against by this little brat in Sky Cloud City, you developed fear? When he was in the outer sect, it wasn't convenient for me to interfere. But now that he's courting death and insisted on taking part in the inner sect's joint training, I'll let him die without a burial ground and take revenge for junior sister Su Ying and junior brother Wang Feng. Of course, the most important thing is to help Master vent his anger. Although if that's the case, senior brother, don't blame me for not reminding you. This little brat can sometimes display a strength that's even more terrifying than a half-step to Grandmaster. Since he could kill Su Ying and Wang Feng, he won't be too weak. Underestimating the enemy will come with a price. Even though Sua felt that his senior brother was right, Ling Xiao was just an outer disciple. Wasn't he at his mercy? What's more, his senior brother was one of the top 10 core disciples, a 7th-level transcendent realm cultivator. No matter how powerful Ling Xiao was, what could he do? But why did he still feel a strong sense of unease in his heart? All right, no need to say any more. I'm going to see who this Ling Xiao that scared you like a mouse is. Meng Yuan waved his hand and walked out of the volcano palace. Flame Tongue, Flame Eye, I'll leave Master in your care. We'll be back soon. Sua and Ming Tian also followed. Inner Sect Main Hall, where the slaves lived. Ling Xiao and Swordsman King had already discussed the conditions of the spar, but Swordsman King made another request. This spar is fair and just. Senior brother thinks we should go to the inner sect's challenge stage. What do you think, junior brotherling? This guy is really ruthless. Not only does he want to humiliate senior brotherling, he also wants him to lose face in front of all the inner sect disciples. Jian Xing gritted his teeth and said with some displeasure, last time I lost all my face like this. Senior brotherling, don't agree to it. Lin Feng advised, it's fine, let's go to the challenge stage. Anyway, if I lose, The three of us will become his slaves. Can't we compete anywhere? Besides, there are no conditions for a spar here. Chapter 353. Good, you've got guts. Then I'll go and wait for you. Don't run away, ha ha ha. Novel, la, the swordsman king laughed and left. He wasn't afraid that Ling Xiao would run away, because if Ling Xiao didn't participate, he would lose. Unless he ran away from the Yuehua school, he wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being a slave. After the swordsman king left, Ling Xiao didn't stay for long. Anyway, he didn't plan to stay where the slaves lived. This was clearly done by the inner sect to annoy them. Now that the swordsman king had delivered himself to his door, he might as well accept his kindness. Zhao Ji, senior sister Yuling, I'll have to rely on you to take care of me. I'm an outer sect disciple, so you can't just stand by and watch. On the way, Ling Xiao cracked a joke in order to ease the tense atmosphere. Ling Xiao, don't joke around. Although you haven't been promoted to the inner sect, we all know that you're stronger than both of us. Dai Yuling smiled bitterly. But there are many people stronger than you in the inner sect. I think you should be careful not to offend the inner sect disciples, especially the top 10 core disciples. Senior sister Lan is a core disciple, right? Ling Xiao asked. Yes, senior sister Lan is the second strongest core disciple. To be precise, the full name of a core disciple should be a core inner sect disciple. The 10 of them are the top 10 in the inner sect. Zhao Ji replied. Oh, so that's the case. Then what are the inner sect activities these days? I'm a participant in the inner sect joint training, so I can't just fight with you inner sect disciples, right? Ling Xiao asked curiously. There aren't many activities in the inner sect recently. Everyone is preparing for the Moon Festival Tower Ascension ceremony in 2 months, so they won't go out to do missions easily. Zhao Ji continued, I've asked around. The outer disciples who participate in the joint training will still receive the same salary as the outer disciples and won't have to change their clothes. Everything else will be treated like the low-level inner disciples. That is to say, you can also accept missions that only inner disciples are qualified to accept. Wait, in other words, the 3 of us should also be able to get our own cave abodes, right? Ling Xiao asked. That's right. That is the rule. However, the inner sect hall has always been domineering. They simply don't put the outer disciples in their eyes. This rule basically exists in name only, Zhaoji said with a nod. Haha, as expected. Ling Xiao smiled and then asked, what I'm more concerned about is actually the Moon Arrival Pagoda Ascension Ceremony. Who in your inner sect will participate? Will the top 10 core disciples participate? I don't think so. Zhao Ji shook his head and said, as far as I know, the Moon Festival Tower Ascension Ceremony is held once a year. The age limit is below 30, and each person only has 3 chances. The top 10 core disciples have already been there 3 times, so I don't think they will participate. Oh, is that so? Then this Tower Ascension Ceremony is quite simple. Ling Xiao said with a smile. Simple? Zhao Ji smiled bitterly. According to the previous information, I have come to a conclusion. If you want to be eligible to participate in the Tower Ascension Ceremony, your cultivation must at least reach the 5th heavenly layer of the Transcendent Realm, which is the so-called Transcendent Divine Force Realm. So exaggerated, Ling Xiao couldn't help but frown. He originally thought that with many restrictions, the competition for the Moon Arrival Pagoda Ascension Ceremony wouldn't be so fierce. Now it seemed that his thinking was a bit too simple. My cultivation is still not enough. I need to continue improving. Ling Xiao secretly clenched his fists, but his expression didn't change. Sigh, in any case, there's no hope for me. Zhao Ji sighed, then mustered up his courage and said, fortunately, the age limit is below 30. I'm still young, so I can't participate this time. We'll talk about it later. Zhao Xi and I are also not eligible to participate for the time being. Dai Yuling also smiled bitterly. According to Zhao Zi's standards, it was no wonder that no one in the outer sect was eligible to participate in the Tower Ascension ceremony. Fifth heavenly layer, transcendent realm. This was definitely not a cultivation that an outer sect disciple could achieve. After all, once an outer sect disciple broke through to the transcendent realm, they had always been eager to advance to the inner sect. There had never been anyone like Ling Xiao who refused to leave the outer sect. If one's cultivation was at the fifth heavenly layer of the transcendent realm, it was likely that Ming Tian and Lung Hao wouldn't have the opportunity to participate. But in the end, cultivation wasn't strength. Ling Xiao absolutely believed that if Ming Tian and Lung Hao's cultivations could reach the fourth heavenly layer of the transcendent realm in 2 months, they would still be eligible to participate in the Tower Ascension ceremony. The reason why geniuses were geniuses was because they could display more terrifying combat power than ordinary people. Challenging people above their own realms was a common occurrence for geniuses. By the way, Junior Brother Ling, I don't know if anyone told you that outer sect disciples who participate in the inner sect's joint training can receive a wooden token from the inner sect's Moonlight Pavilion. Didn't the deacon who led you in give it to you? Zhao Ji suddenly asked. He really deserved to have an elder imperial uncle. He knew much more about the inner sect's joint training than Ling Xiao and the others. A wooden token from the inner sect's Moonlight Pavilion? Ling Xiao, Jian Xing, and Lin Feng were all dumbfounded. I've never heard of it. Jian Xing smiled bitterly. I've participated in the inner sect's joint training 2 or 3 times, but no one has ever told me about it. Where did you see it? It's in the inner sect's joint training regulations. It's a rigid rule of the sect. I guess the inner sect deacon took the token and gave it to his own people. After all, it's not easy to enter the inner sect's Moonlight Pavilion. Even inner sect disciples have a limit on the number of times they can enter. Zhao Ji explained, I got a copy from Imperial Uncle. Take this to the inner sect deacon. No matter what, you have to get this opportunity. It's too precious, especially for outer sect disciples like you. Many thanks, Senior Brother Zhao. As Zhao Ji had been promoted to inner sect, Ling Xiao and Zhao Ji had changed the way they addressed each other. This was common knowledge in the sect. Ling Xiao had actually wanted to go to the inner sect's Moonlight Pavilion once. Unfortunately, even after being promoted to inner sect, he still had to do missions and accumulate enough sect points to have a chance. There were still many things to do, so he might as well complete the Tower Ascension ceremony as an outer sect disciple. This time, the inner sect joint training was an extra opportunity. He had to seize it. The inner sect's Moonlight Pavilion was divided into 3 grades: Rare Gold Grade Martial Arts, Superior Gold Grade Martial Arts, and Top Gold Grade Martial Arts. Therefore, there were 3 doors separated by a mysterious array. Since Ling Xiao had entered the pavilion once, he had already imprinted the array into his Mountain River martial spirit and handed it over to his Mountain River martial spirit to analyze and decipher. Chapter 354. He had already made a qualitative breakthrough in deciphering the ancient formation of the inner sect's Moonlight Tower. Lottie's time, Ling Xiao wanted to try and see if he could steal the martial arts behind the other 2 doors after entering the wooden door. He would never complain about having too many good martial arts. Even if he didn't learn them now, he could use them to feed the Cloud Dragon divine travel and the 9 demons divine art in the future. Through the analysis of the mountain and river martial soul, Ling Xiao discovered that the formation of the inner sect's Moonlight Tower was complex and profound. However, over the past 100,000 years, as the human race declined, the number of formation experts in the Yuehua school decreased. As a result, they couldn't find anyone who could completely repair the formation of the Guanghan Palace. Not to mention, the formation of the inner sect's Moonlight Tower was even more complex and profound than the one in the Guanghan Palace. The more complex, profound, and sophisticated a formation was, the easier it was to have problems. If it couldn't be repaired in time, the problem would become bigger and bigger. Ling Xiao might not be able to completely decipher the formation for the time being, but as long as he understood the principles of the formation, it wouldn't be impossible for him to use the loopholes to obtain the martial arts secret manual he wanted. There were Sky Realm experts in the Inner Sect's Moonlight Tower. However, just like Wang Han Tianzuan, being strong didn't mean that he knew how to decipher formations. As long as Ling Xiao was careful, there was a high chance that he could achieve what he wanted. If the so-called formation experts in the Yuehua School's formation hall knew about this, their eyes would probably fall out of their sockets. These people had inherited the knowledge of generations of formation experts, but they were still helpless against the formation of the Inner Sect's Moonlight Tower. Even the formation hall's hallmaster, the #1 formation expert in the Yuehua School, could barely understand 10% or 20% of it. Therefore, the formation hall's method was to set up their own formation outside the ancient formation. Although this formation was relatively simple and low-level, it was enough to guard against most martial artists. At the very least, they were confident that no one in the Yuehua School could decipher their formation. Little did they know that the array they had set up was not even worth mentioning to Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao was only concerned about the primordial array. What he had been studying these days was only that primordial array. Junior brotherling, we've arrived at the Inner Court Challenge arena. Zhao Zi's voice awakened Ling Xiao from his contemplation. He raised his head and saw that there were close to 100 people gathered here, including the top 10 core disciples. There were only 200 Inner Sect disciples in the Yuehua sect. This time, nearly 100 people had come. The Swordsman King must have called them here on purpose. At that moment, the Swordsman King was chatting with a few other inner disciples. From time to time, he would burst out laughing. It seemed that he was in a good mood. The Inner Disciples' Challenge stage was obviously more sturdy than the Outer Disciples' Challenge stage. Other than better materials, a more complete formation was also set up. It was estimated that even a Celestial Realm elite would not be able to easily destroy the challenge platform. Even if it was destroyed, the challenge platform would automatically repair itself. This was much more advanced than the Outer Court challenge platform. When the Inner Disciples saw Ling Xiao, Jian Xing, and Lin Feng rushing over, their eyes were either filled with disdain or pity. Here, they had seen many self-righteous Outer Sect disciples being beaten to a pulp. They wondered how Ling Xiao would beg for mercy today. The Swordsman King also saw Ling Xiao and could not help but sneer. With so many inner disciples here today, the Swordsman King could be considered to be famous in the inner court. Look, the second-ranked core disciple, Lan Yu is here. Suddenly a voice called out. Almost all the inner disciples in the arena looked over. Lan Yu was wearing a light blue long dress today. It was obvious that she had dressed up meticulously. She looked as beautiful as a lotus flower. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also very strong. Such a woman was extremely rare even in the Sky Dragon continent. Lan Yu was undoubtedly the role model, goal, and object of admiration in the hearts of all the female disciples, and in the hearts of all the male disciples. She was no doubt the dream lover, a fairy, a goddess high above all others. The Swordsman King felt his heart beating faster, and his saliva unconsciously flowed out. Junior brotherling, why didn't you inform me in advance that you were coming to the inner court? I could have prepared a welcoming party for you. Unexpectedly, under everyone's gaze, Lan Yu walked towards Ling Xiao with a smile. Not only was her smile bright, but it was also a kind of happiness. The smell of jealousy, a strong smell of jealousy, suddenly filled the air around the challenge platform. Ling Xiao could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. This senior sister Lan, aren't you making enemies for me? Senior sister, I'm just here to train for a few days. I'm not even promoted to the inner court. What's there to welcome? He walked forward and said with a smile, Hee, right. By the way, has your cave residence been arranged? Have you received the wooden token to enter the inner court's Moonlight Tower? Lan Yu or did not know why she was so concerned about Ling Xiao. Anyway, this was her original intention. She was just doing things according to her heart. Senior Sister Lan, we were directly arranged to live in the slave's small broken house. There is no cave residence at all. Without waiting for Ling Xiao to answer, Jian Xing indignantly said, also the deacon who welcomed us did not give us any token at all. And Lan Yu frowned. Usually, she never cared about these things. She did not know what to do in the inner court. Until a few days ago, when she heard from Yang Danlin that Ling Xiao was coming to participate in the inner court joint training. She excitedly investigated this inner court joint training. That was how she found out about these things. She did not hide that she did these things because of Ling Xiao. Come with me. Lan Yu was not a busybody, but if she could not even settle Ling Xiao's matter, she, as the second core disciple, was too useless. Senior Sister Lan, I still have a spar with Junior Brother Ling. Could you? The swordsman king suddenly came over, but halfway through his words, he suddenly felt as if several mountains were pressing down on him. That feeling of fear made him unable to breathe. He suddenly realized that this person was suitable to be a core disciple. Core disciples had special privileges in the Yuehua school. If he was really killed on the spot, he would not have any temper. Senior Brother Bitch, don't worry. It won't be too late to compete after we receive the token. Ling Xiao smiled and said, Okay, no problem, no problem. The swordsman king could feel that the moment Ling Xiao spoke, the pressure on him suddenly lessened. A core disciple was too terrifying. If it wasn't for Ling Xiao, he would have already suffered from qi deviation due to the pressure. Deacon Wang. Chapter 355. Oh, so it's Junior Sister Lan. What can I do for you? Deacon Wang asked with a big smile. Ling Xiao is my friend. Why didn't you arrange a cave residence for him and give him a wooden token to enter the Moonlight Tower? Lan Yu asked coldly. Hee, Junior Sister Lan, you don't know. We have always done this. Deacon Wang said with a fake smile. What do you mean? Don't the sect rules bind you? Lan Yu's face became even colder. How can that be? It's just that this has become an unspoken rule. Junior Sister Lan, don't meddle in other people's business. This is not my intention. It's the order of the inner sect's higher-ups. I'm just following the rules. Attendant Wang's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He could clearly feel the killing intent from Lan Yu. I don't want to listen to your nonsense. In the end, the three of them can have a cave residence that is equivalent to the residence of the inner sect's top 200 disciples. In addition, each of them can also get a wooden token to enter the inner sect's Moonlight Tower. Are you going to give it to me or not? Lan Yu asked. She was in the right in this matter. According to the rules, Attendant Wang had to arrange everything properly. Otherwise, he would be derelict in his duty and break the law knowingly. The punishment would be very severe. Junior Sister Lan, don't go too far. I've already said that this is not something I can decide on my own. It's the decision of the inner sect's higher-ups. Although Attendant Wang was afraid, he seemed to be relying on the backing behind him. He still insisted. Whose decision is it? Call him out. I'd like to see who has the guts to ignore the sect's rules. There were some things that needed to be taken seriously. If no one cared, the unspoken rules might work. But once someone took it seriously, the matter would be serious. It's my decision. What are you going to do about it? Suddenly, an aged voice rang out. It was a one-eyed old man who walked out of the inner sect's main hall. One-eyed Heavenly Lord. The title of One-eyed Heavenly Lord didn't sound elegant, but he didn't mind. In fact, he was very happy. Because he lost his eye in a battle with a powerful beast king. He felt that it was an honor. One-eyed Heavenly Lord was not a celestial being. Strictly speaking, he was only a half-step Empyrean. In other words, he was stronger than the peak of the transcendent realm, but had yet to break through to the heaven realm. It was similar to a half-step master. However, a half-step Heavenly Venerable was still a heavenly venerable. At the very least, that was how they were addressed. Lan Yu looked at the old man in front of her with disgust in her eyes. This one-eyed celestial lord had made great contributions to the Yuehua school, so he had always disobeyed the rules. Embezzling a disciple's salary was a small matter. It was said that many outer sect and even inner sect female disciples had been defiled by him. However, no one had ever pursued this matter. This was because he was the hero of the Yuehua school. The headmaster had given him a military order. That's right, it's me. Now that you know, you'd better leave quickly. Do you think a few mere outer sect disciples are worthy of owning an inner sect disciple's cave abode? Was he worthy of entering the inner sect's moonlight tower? Don't even think about it. A bunch of scum. One-eyed exalted celestial glanced sideways at Ling Xiao and the other two. A terrifying aura instantly pressed towards them. Humph. Lan Yu stood in front of Ling Xiao and the other two. She snorted coldly and said, "So what if it's you? As an inner sect elder, you broke the law by enforcing the rules." Ha ha ha. Lan Yu this old man is disobeying the rules today. What can you do about it? One-eyed exalted celestial lord laughed loudly. He did not put Lan Yu in his eyes at all. He was a half-step exalted celestial lord, while Lan Yu was only a transcendent realm grandmaster. In terms of strength, he was not afraid of Lan Yu. In terms of backing, he had the headmaster of the Yuehua school behind him, so he was not afraid of Lan Yu. If you don't follow the rules, I'll beat you until you follow the rules. As soon as Lan Yu finished speaking, she suddenly attacked. Her jade-like hand instantly turned into a true essence giant hand. It seemed to reach out from the void and directly grabbed at one-eyed exalted celestial lord. "Stinky girl, you're courting death." One-eyed exalted celestial lord roared. The true essence in his body vibrated as he punched out. Ignorant, Lan Yu did not even blink as the true essence giant hand slapped down. "No. How is this possible?" One-eyed exalted celestial lord howled in horror. The true essence giant hand shattered the bones in his fists. Even he was completely suppressed by the true essence giant hand and could not move an inch. "Are you giving me the things or not?" Lan Yu was like a majestic Valkyrie. She looked condescendingly at one-eyed exalted celestial lord and asked, "You don't dare to do anything to me." One-eyed exalted celestial lord roared. "Oh, is that so?" Lan Yu's true essence giant hand exerted more force. One-eyed exalted celestial lord's ribs began to break. "You're crazy. Deacon Wang, give them the cave residence and the token." One-eyed exalted celestial lord howled miserably. "Wouldn't it have been over if you had done this earlier?" Lan Yu coldly withdrew the true essence giant hand. She could frighten a half-step exalted celestial lord with one move. This was the strength of the second-ranked core disciple. How terrifying! She's indeed our idol. She's indeed my dream lover. I'm afraid she'll be the next young sect master, right? Lan Yu had defeated one-eyed exalted celestial lord in the blink of an eye. Although many people had seen it, they had no idea how Lan Yu had done it. Haha, senior sister Lan, you're amazing. In front of you, I'm not even worth mentioning. After receiving the wooden token and a cave residence, Ling Xiao was in a good mood. He smiled and said to Lan Yu, but you've offended an inner elder. Are you okay? He's just a half-step, celestial master elder. It's okay to scare the other inner disciples. Among the top 10 core disciples, no one will take him seriously. Do you really think the sect master will protect him? Lan Yu smiled and shook her head. He's made a contribution to the sect, and the sect master gave him a token. Naturally, he can't punish him. He can only let him degenerate and walk the path of self-destruction. The sect master has a deep plan. How terrifying! Ling Xiao couldn't help but shake his head. There were also terrible power struggles in the sect. This was probably the reason why Master Baiyun had told him that he must find a backer. Without a backer, it would be hard to fight alone. Moreover, there was a possibility of death at any time. As the saying goes, when the great gods fight, ordinary people suffer. However, if he had a backer, he would be able to enjoy the shade under a big tree. This was really a life experience. Junior brother Ling, I won't interfere in the competition. Is that okay? Lan Yu suddenly smiled and walked to the challenge platform. Of course, no problem. Ling Xiao smiled. If he couldn't solve this problem, he wouldn't have learned martial arts and participated in the inner disciple joint training. He would have hidden in the outer disciple to fend for himself. Chapter 356. Ling Xiao, now that you have a cave residence, you won't refuse to accept my request, right? Swordsman King said. Ling Xiao walked back. Although he was afraid of Lan Yu, he was not afraid of Ling Xiao at all. Lan Yu, I had already said that she would not interfere in this matter, so he had nothing to worry about. Of course, he did not dare to be ruthless to Ling Xiao. Otherwise, with Lan Yu's temper, he was afraid that he would be torn apart. How is that possible? It's too crowded for the three of us to live in a cave residence. Ling Xiao shrugged his shoulders and said, Of course, I accept your request. He did not want to practice in front of others, so it was necessary for him to have a cave residence. Swordsman King smiled and secretly said, Ling Xiao, oh Ling Xiao, I will definitely make you lose face in front of Lan Yu. You damn beggar. Why are you so close to Lan Yu? He touched his storage ring. There was a pill inside, a pill that could allow him to easily defeat Ling Xiao. If he didn't have that thing, he really wouldn't have dared to challenge Ling Xiao so casually. But now he was full of confidence. Inner disciple Swordsman King versus outer disciple Ling Xiao. Both of them are now on the challenge stage. The rules of the competition are posted on the wall over there. I won't say much about it. Generally speaking, the competition needed to be hosted, and Deacon Wang was often the host of the competition. Although his strength was not very strong, he was still an inner deacon, so he still had a lot of authority. But at this time, his heart was full of hatred for Ling Xiao. Lan Yu had made him lose face, so he did not dare to provoke Lan Yu. But in his heart, he cursed Ling Xiao and Lan Yu. He did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. Understood. Swordsman King nodded and muttered, It's not the first time, it's really troublesome. Ling Xiao also nodded. Although the rules of the competition were very unfair to the outer disciples, he was powerless to change it. He could only maintain his victory in the competition. Begin. Deacon Wang jumped down from the challenge stage, and for a moment the atmosphere on the stage became tense. Looking at the two Yuehua School's disciples on the challenge stage, everyone's eyes were full of interest. They had heard of Ling Xiao's prestige in the outer sect, but because not many had seen it, there were not many who believed it. It could even be said that many people's expectation to see Ling Xiao be defeated by the Swordsman King and kneeling on the challenge stage, just like how the Swordsman King defeated Jianxing. No matter how powerful Lan Yu is, that's Lan Yu's ability, not yours. Below the stage, Estasi, he knew the Swordsman King too well. Although he was not weak, he was never willing to use his true strength to win. He would always use some tricks or schemes in battle. When he investigated the information regarding the joint training of the inner sanctum, the description of this person could only be described as sinister and cunning. Although Ling Xiao was powerful, when faced with such a treacherous and cunning person, did he really have any hope of winning? You're called Zhao Ji, right? Lan Yu, I suddenly asked with a smile. Yes, Senior Sister Lan. Seeing how nervous you are, do you think Junior Brother Ling can't win? Lan Yu asked with a faint smile. Zhao Ji smiled wryly. This core disciple's observation skills were truly meticulous. He could only nod and say in a serious tone, reporting to Senior Sister Lan, I understand Junior Brother Ling's strength. I'm afraid he wouldn't lose to a peak first layer, transcendent realm grandmaster. However, the swordsman king is cunning and cunning. I'm afraid junior brotherling's chances of winning are not high. He was being polite. In fact, he had seen the results of the outer sect disciples who fought the swordsman king. They all lost miserably. For example, outer sect disciples like Wang Feng, Ji Ming, and Jian Xing would rather fight a core disciple and be defeated in one move than fight the swordsman king. He was really worried that something would happen to Ling Xiao. Haha, is that so? Lan Yu's beautiful eyes moved slightly as she smiled and blinked her slender eyelashes. Her pair of beautiful eyes once again looked towards Ling Xiao on the battle stage. Her rosy cherry lips parted slightly, revealing a hint of charm amidst her holiness. She chuckled and said, "However, I don't think so. Treacherous and cunning people are like hairless mice in front of Ling Xiao. Other than being unlucky, they have no other way out." Zhao Ji smiled bitterly. He thought that Lan Yu's relationship with Ling Xiao was too good. So she trusted Ling Xiao so much. It was a bit like the onlooker couldn't see clearly. He was a bystander, so naturally he could see things more clearly and objectively. Of course, I also hope Ling Xiao can win. These were his heartfelt words, but could he really win? Looking at Ling Xiao, who was casually standing in front of him, the swordsman king sneered. The swordsman king snickered as he got into his stance and raised his sword. Boom! An explosive Zhan Yuan burst out in an instant, completely wrapping around the long sword, making people feel a burst of powerful energy gushing out. After pausing for a moment, the swordsman king suddenly pointed the long sword at Ling Xiao. His feet suddenly stomped on the ground, and his body suddenly rushed out, heading straight for Ling Xiao, who was a few meters away. At the same time, the long sword began to friction with the air, splashing out blazing flames, and the air was filled with the smell of something being burnt. The true yuan wrapping around the long sword also turned into flames in an instant. When he was less than a meter away from Ling Xiao, the swordsman king suddenly accelerated, and the sword went straight for Ling Xiao's throat. Rare gold-grade martial skill, flame assassination. Seeing the swordsman king's attack head-on, Ling Xiao's face was still as calm as before. He stretched out his right hand at a perfect speed, neither too fast nor too slow. 2 fingers. They were Ling Xiao's right index finger and middle finger. Then the 2 fingers accurately caught the blade of the swordsman king's sword. Not a bad move, very beautiful. Unfortunately, it's too superficial. Speaking up to here, Ling Xiao gently flicked the 2 fingers on his right hand. Suddenly, a terrifying force was transmitted from the sword to the swordsman king's hand. The swordsman king's entire body seemed to have been hit by a hammer. The web between his thumb and forefinger split open, and he could no longer hold onto the long sword in his hand. His body was also pushed back more than 10 steps before pausing in a sorry state. His arms were still trembling. Below the stage, Zhao Ji's breathing quickened as he watched the sudden turn of events. He thought that he already knew Ling Xiao very well, but today he suddenly realized that he had only just met Ling Xiao. Beside him, Lan Yu smiled sweetly and nodded slightly. She knew that this was only Ling Xiao showing a little of his strength. If Ling Xiao really used his full strength, all the inner disciples would be shocked. Senior brother Ling is so strong. Jian Xing was stunned. Last year, he was heavily injured by the swordsman king's move. Otherwise, he might have been able to challenge Wang Feng for the outer disciples' #1 position. Chapter 357. Junior brother Ling really can't see through him. Dai Yuling shook her head and smiled bitterly. She couldn't see through Ling Xiao when they were in the latent dragon camp. Now that they were in the Yuehua school, she realized that Ling Xiao was getting more and more mysterious. What kind of martial skill is that? The swordsman king felt the burning pain from his hand and looked at Ling Xiao in horror. Ling Xiao looked at the swordsman king indifferently and then looked at his right hand. He muttered to himself, "Martial skill? So you have to use martial skills to deal with inner sect disciples?" That move just now was just an ordinary defense. Any martial artist with a solid foundation could do it. However, to be able to catch the opponent's sword without getting hurt, that was a very high requirement. Against a martial artist like the Swordsman King, he really didn't need to use martial skills. "Don't look down on me." Hearing that, Ling Xiao didn't even bother to use martial skills. The Swordsman King trembled in anger. After that, he gritted his teeth and stood up. He didn't even pick up the sword that had been thrown on the ground. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he actually rushed towards Ling Xiao with his hands in his sleeves. "Junior brother Ling, be careful. This guy is up to something." Although Zhao Ji didn't know what the Swordsman King wanted to do, he believed that this cunning guy would definitely use some underhanded methods if he couldn't win in a direct confrontation. "Thank you, senior brother Zhao, but he can't hurt me." Ling Xiao stood there and didn't have any intention of making a move. "Activate the law of martial Dao. I won't make a move. If your underhanded methods against me don't work, then they will be used on you." Hearing Ling Xiao's sudden words, the crowd was stunned. They didn't understand what was going on. Is there something wrong with Ling Xiao's brain? Yeah, who knows what he's thinking? I don't understand this guy at all. He's obviously not weak, so he should just end the battle. Swordsman King. That trash. He's a disgrace to the inner sanctum. When the Swordsman King heard these people's discussion, he became even more angry. He originally didn't dare to kill Ling Xiao because he was afraid of Lan Yuer's revenge. However, when he heard such discussions, he had basically completely lost his mind. Seeing Ling Xiao's figure getting closer and closer, the Swordsman King finally revealed a cold smile and took out his fists from his sleeves. His fists were surrounded by green light, an aura even more terrifying than the Swordsman King's own vital essence was emitted. "Toxic Divine Fist." A loud shout was heard. The swordsman monarch clenched his fists even tighter. A thick stench accompanied by the sound of wind breaking rang out in the air. Then he heavily struck Ling Xiao's chest. "It's actually the poison Divine Fist." Lan Yuer frowned. "What's so special about this fist technique?" Dai Yuling asked, puzzled. "This fist technique itself isn't terrifying. It's only a rare rank entry martial art. However, it can be infused with toxic substances to create a terrifying power." Lan Yuer explained. "I'm guessing that the Swordsman King must have some sort of toxic substance in his hands. He's really unscrupulous in order to win. This is a spar, not a life and death battle." Her face was cold and gloomy. The Swordsman King actually tried to kill Ling Xiao in front of her. This was something she couldn't tolerate. However, she didn't know why she wasn't worried about Ling Xiao. Instead, she had an inexplicable sense of confidence. On the other hand, Dai Yuling and Zhao Ji's faces were pale with worry. That's right, the Swordsman King didn't intend to hold back because of his pride. Anyway, according to the rules of the spar, even if an inner disciple killed an outer disciple, they would only be fined some salary and face the wall to reflect on their actions. He wasn't afraid. "Don't blame me if you die. You deserve it." The Swordsman King revealed a sinister smile as he looked at Ling Xiao and thought to himself. Ling Xiao just stood there and looked at the Swordsman King's hands that were glowing with green light. According to the martial Dao he set, he couldn't attack at this moment. He could only defend. Otherwise, the martial Dao wouldn't take effect. His body emitted a faint golden light as the heavenly dragon scale armor began to quickly cover his body. The Swordsman King's attack wasn't that powerful. However, because of the toxic substance, it was better to be careful. The heavenly dragon scale armor could resist true yuan and toxic substances. This was without a doubt. Bang! The Swordsman King's fists landed squarely on Ling Xiao's body. He then quickly retreated a dozen steps and looked at Ling Xiao with a sinister smile. Boom! An explosion sounded out from Ling Xiao's body. Then, Ling Xiao was enveloped in a cloud of green. The air was filled with a foul stench. Many inner disciples near the stage hurriedly retreated a few steps. They were afraid of the stench. Pucci! Suddenly, an extremely strange scene appeared on the stage. Ling Xiao, who was supposed to be injured, slowly walked out from the green smoke. At that moment, the green smoke and the terrifying explosion suddenly disappeared as if they were sucked away by a black hole. On the other side, the swordsman king suddenly knelt on the ground and spat out a mouthful of green blood. His face was still filled with shock and confusion. He looked at the swordsman king, who was almost paralyzed. Then he glanced at the dumbfounded expressions below the stage. Ling Xiao revealed a faint smile. I said that all your tricks are useless against me. Then they will be used on you. Now you've lost. He looked at the swordsman king, who was mysteriously defeated on the stage. After a moment of shock and silence, the crowd below the stage began to boil. Confusion and shock became the main theme here. Nearly 200 inner disciples had arrived. They were all shocked and confused as they discussed the swordsman king lying in a pool of blood. As inner disciples, they were well aware of the swordsman king's strength. Although he wasn't the strongest in the inner sect, he was definitely not at the bottom. He was at least ranked in the 180s. What's more, once this guy used his insidious means, even the top 100 inner disciples didn't want to fight him. The toxic divine fist just now was infused with a very rare poison. Once, a transcendent realm third layer cultivator suffered a great loss. However, all of this was completely destroyed by Ling Xiao. In just 2 moves, the first time, the swordsman king's sword was easily caught and sent flying. The second time, the swordsman king was inexplicably injured by his own toxic divine fist. Didn't all the outer disciples in the past lose cleanly to the swordsman king? This sudden turn of events was hard for many of the inner court disciples to accept. Below the stage, Ming Tian had also arrived. Looking at the swordsman king, who was easily defeated, his face was filled with disbelief. His mouth was wide enough to fit an egg, showing the shock in his heart. Chapter 358. After a long time, Ming Tian gradually came back to his senses. His originally ashen face returned to normal, but the corner of his mouth raised a confident sneer. Ling Xiao, you are indeed worthy of being my junior brother. In just 2 months, you have become so strong, but you will never catch up to me. Never. Hee, I have already said that you don't have to worry about junior brotherling's strength. Not only is he strong enough, but he also has many tricks up his sleeve. His wisdom is outstanding. The swordsman king tried to use underhanded means to deal with him. Yuling, Zhaoji, are you relieved now? Below the stage, Lan Yu also showed a trace of astonishment, then instantly recovered her joyful expression. To be honest, she was very confident in Ling Xiao, but the martial Tao law that Ling Xiao displayed still surprised her. Her seductive eyes flickered with excitement. Then she turned around and said to the people behind her, Lan Yu, was now convinced that Ling Xiao's self-learning ability was too strong. She was originally worried that Ling Xiao would not be able to enter the inner sect for a long time, resulting in him not being able to learn profound martial arts. But now it seemed that her worries were completely unnecessary. Hearing Lan Yu's words, Dai Yuling and Zhao Ji were also very excited. They were even more shocked than Lan Yu. When Ling Xiao defeated the swordsman king for the first time, they could at least understand that it was because of Ling Xiao's superior physique and Jin Yuan. But the martial Tao law that he used the second time, they had never heard of it. Ling Xiao, this fellow, had unknowingly become stronger again. Moreover, he was ridiculously strong. But who did he learn this martial Tao law from? Lan Yu, Zhao Ji, and Dai Yuling all had the same question. He, Sua, Ming Tian, and the others also had the same question. Because in the inner sect's Moonlight Tower, they were convinced that such a martial art did not exist. Almost at the same time, everyone's eyes turned to Ling Xiao on the stage. This guy, I'm afraid he still has many secrets. From the day he entered Yuehua School, he seemed to have been creating miracles. At the edge of the challenge stage, Deacon Wang, who was in charge of the sparring, stared at the swordsman king who was lying limp on the ground with an ugly expression. He was very disappointed. What he wanted to see was Ling Xiao begging for mercy. What was going on? Why was it the swordsman king who was knocked down instead of Ling Xiao? He turned his head to look at Ling Xiao, hoping to find a trace of injury on Ling Xiao's body. However, the young man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. There was not even the slightest trace of blood on his slightly delicate and young face, let alone a wound. Even the young man's clothes were as clean as new. If someone had just arrived here, they might have mistakenly thought that Ling Xiao had not fought at all. Deacon Wang sighed helplessly, just as he was about to jump onto the challenge platform and announce the end of this battle. A powerful evil aura suddenly caused his expression to change drastically. Just as he was about to jump up, he stood back down. On the challenge platform, the swordsman king, who was lying limp in a pool of blood, suddenly jumped up from the ground like a monster that had been reborn from blood. His true essence, which was not strong at first, suddenly increased by several times. Even his body became much stronger than before. His eyes shone with a crazy red light, and his hair was messy and draped over his shoulders. Boom! There was a burst of sound as his body shot out like lightning. The entire challenge stage shook violently. The surrounding inner court disciples who were watching the battle were also shocked. While charging, the swordsman king's expression was hideous and terrifying. It was as if he had turned into a demon from hell. Fresh, green blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He roared crazily, "Little beggar, give me your life!" Deacon Wang was stunned for a moment, then sneered. He could have stopped the swordsman king, but he did not. He knew what had happened to the swordsman king. This guy had consumed the demonic elixir made by an evil alchemist. Not only did his true essence increase dramatically, his strength increased greatly, and he looked like a terrifying monster. At this time, the swordsman king's lethality was no doubt astonishing. Deacon Wang only hoped that before the swordsman king's cultivation went berserk, he would first kill Ling Xiao. At the very least, he had to seriously injure Ling Xiao. Only then would he be able to resolve the hatred in his heart. The stronger inner disciples also noticed this, but they did not care whether Ling Xiao lived or died. At this time, they could clearly feel that the swordsman king's strength had soared to the peak of the transcendent realm third layer. Facing such a terrifying opponent, even if Ling Xiao did not die, he would be seriously injured. "Master, this is bad. The swordsman king took the demonic elixir." Dai Yuling was a disciple of the medicine hall after all, so she was very knowledgeable, especially when it came to pills. She had seen the demonic elixir in a book before. So at this time her pretty face was filled with anxiety as she shouted to her master Lan Yu, "Bastard!" Lan Yu, who rarely used foul language, was furious. The swordsman king could not obtain the demonic elixir. Someone must have given it to him in advance. If I find out who it was, I will not forgive him. "Master, aren't we going to save Ling Xiao?" Dai Yuling anxiously asked. "Yuling, don't worry. With me here, nothing will happen to Ling Xiao." Dai Yuling's true qi leaked out and actually flew through the cracks in the ground to the challenge stage, completely enveloping it. If Ling Xiao's life was in danger, she could immediately save Ling Xiao. But now was not the time for her to intervene. Although the rules stated that pills could not be used to enhance one's strength, if she intervened now, she was afraid that Ling Xiao would not be happy. She knew that little brat's temper too well. Among the crowd, Meng Yuan grinned. The demonic elixir in the swordsman king's hand was given to him by him. Just as the swordsman king was waiting for Ling Xiao to come, he rushed over and gave the elixir to the swordsman king and explained the situation. To deal with an outer disciple like Ling Xiao, it was not worth it for him to personally take action. Looking at Lan Yu, Er's attitude. If he did, she would definitely stop him. On the challenge stage, Lan Yu, Er's threat did not have any effect. The swordsman king in his demonic elixir state only knew that he had to kill the enemy. He could not hear any sound outside, nor did he know fear. The distance was close. The swordsman king put his hands together and condensed a strange black sword chi. Then he roared, "Demonic sword kill!" His strength suddenly skyrocketed, coupled with the evil aura shrouding him. The swordsman king's move was powerful. It caused the air to violently flow, forming a terrifying wind pressure. The wind blew Ling Zhao's clothes, making a flapping sound. However, Ling Zhao's eyes did not close because of this. He was still indifferent as he looked at the swordsman king. Facing the swordsman king's sudden increase in strength, many people thought that Ling Zhao would temporarily avoid the attack and plan for the future. After all, Ling Zhao's movement technique was said to be very strong. Chapter 359. Below the stage, almost everyone thought that Ling Zhao would choose to dodge the attack of the swordsman king, whose strength had skyrocketed. However, to their surprise, Ling Zhao had no intention of dodging. He stood there, unhurriedly assuming a fighting stance. Clenching his fists, a faint phantom of a ghost king appeared around his body. In that instant, Ling Zhao seemed like a terrifying ghost king waiting to strike. A moment later, his fist suddenly punched out. "Fool!" Seeing Ling Zhao actually trying to meet the Sword King head-on, Meng Yuan couldn't help but sneer, secretly cursing Ling Zhao in his heart. Peak Transcendent Realm Third Layer. How could a trivial half-step Grandmaster compare to him? Thunder Celestial Phenomenon. Ghost King Annihilation. A deafening clap of thunder suddenly resounded in the sky. At that moment, Ling Zhao's fists met Swordsman King's demon sword annihilation under the shocked gazes of countless people. Pum! The two fists collided in midair. After a moment of silence, the red light in the Sword King's eyes suddenly disappeared and his ferocious expression instantly turned pale. Blood, mixed with bits of internal organs, spurted out from his mouth. Ling Zhao lightly avoided the spurt of blood, his expression indifferent as he punched out with both fists. His arms seemed to be enveloped in a thunderous roar. With a loud bang, the Swordsman King's body flew out of the challenge platform and crashed into the crowd like fragments of a thunderbolt fireball under countless shocked gazes. Seeing this strange scene, Deacon Wang, He Sua, Meng Yuan, Ming Tian, and the others' pupils shrank, and they couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air. Using the strength of a half-step Grandmaster to defeat a peak Transcendent Realm Third Layer cultivator, Ling Zhao's figure, which didn't seem very tall, suddenly became terrifying and mysterious. Looking at the Sword King's body that had been buried more than a foot deep in the ground, everyone was stunned. The crowd fell silent again. The Sword King's life or death was unknown. So this was the result? After a while, these people looked at Ling Zhao again as if they were looking at a monster. They didn't know what kind of pill Sword King had taken, but they could feel that his strength had soared several times over, almost reaching the peak of the Transcendent Third Layer. However, what they did not expect was that the Swordsman King, whose strength had skyrocketed, would lose so miserably and cleanly. Just one punch, the punch that contained the power of thunder, almost caused the Swordsman King's body to explode. Below the stage, Lan Yu had already withdrawn her true essence. However, the sudden change in the situation made it difficult for her to calm down. What a terrifying martial skill! What level of power was this? Gold precious grade? High quality? Could it be a top-notch one? That's impossible. Lan Yu's chest, which had a beautiful curve, quickly rose and fell, announcing the extreme restlessness in her heart. As one of the top 10 core disciples of the Yuehua school, he had naturally cultivated top-notch gold-grade martial arts. But because of this, he knew how difficult it was to cultivate top-notch gold-grade martial arts. Even with her aptitude, Being able to enter the basic level was already very good. Ling Xiao was just an outer disciple. How did he learn it? After a long period of shock, she gradually calmed down and sobered up. After carefully analyzing the martial skill Ling Xiao used, she suddenly realized that it should be the result of a combination of two martial arts. One of the martial arts should be the Divine Prison King's Fist, a gold grade entry level martial art. Although the Yuehua school could not find it, there were records of it. But what was the other martial art that was used together with it? Could it be the 12 Golden Lotus Arts? Lan Yu couldn't help but worry. She was very clear about the risks of the 12 Golden Lotus Arts. When did Ling Xiao cultivate this martial art? On the stage, Ling Xiao slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid qi. The power of thunder gradually subsided, and the true essence wrapped around his hands gradually withdrew. Unfortunately, the time was too short. The Swordsman King didn't even have time to use his martial spirit before it was over. Generally, cultivators rarely used their martial spirits at the beginning of a battle. After all, using one's martial spirit was not without a price. Although it could bring about powerful effects, the consumption was also astonishing. After shaking off the dirt on his body, Ling Xiao indifferently looked at the Swordsman King below the stage. He didn't know if he was still alive or not. His control of strength was already very good. There was no way he could have killed the Swordsman King. It wasn't that he was being kind, but because of the rules of the sect. He didn't want to give someone a chance to find fault with him. The reason why the Swordsman King was unconscious at this time. It was probably because of the poison and the negative effects of the demonic transformation pill. If he died because of these two reasons, then it wasn't Ling Xiao's fault. He was actually very angry. He wanted the Swordsman King to die just like that. The scene just now was indeed a bit shocking. If he hadn't used the true qi of a second layer transcendent at the last moment, he would have been killed by the Swordsman King. Since this guy was so vicious, then why should he be an idiot? He had never been an idiot. He wouldn't sympathize and pity someone without principles. Withdrawing his gaze, Ling Xiao no longer paid attention to the Swordsman King's situation. Instead, he looked at Deacon Wang and said, "Deacon Wang, this battle should be over, right?" "Oh." Deacon Wang swallowed a mouthful of saliva, waking up from his shock. Ling Xiao's performance was really beyond his expectations. He really didn't want to end this battle. But the fact was, what else could he do? Just as he was about to announce the result of the battle, a person suddenly walked out of the crowd and stopped him. "Wait a moment, Deacon Wang. The sect rules state that if an outer court disciple kills or severely cripples an inner court disciple, it is a capital offense." The one who walked out of the crowd was Meng Yuan, the flame deity's chief disciple. He was also one of the 10 core disciples. The one who spoke was naturally him. "Look, it's Meng Yuan. So handsome. The 10 core disciples, their auras are really different." As one of the 10 core disciples, Meng Yuan was not only strong but also very handsome. He had the appearance of a refined cultivator. It was no wonder that he had many fans among the inner court disciples. Meng Yuan's tone was fair and just, but Ling Xiao, Lan Yu, Dai Yuling, and the others knew that this guy was obviously looking for trouble. Lan Yu frowned and asked coldly, "Meng Yuan, what do you want to do?" Meng Yuan smiled faintly. "Senior Sister Lan, it's not that I want to do anything. It's just that the sect rules say so. The Swordsman King is an inner court disciple, a trivial outer court disciple. Yet he was so vicious, seriously injuring him. According to the sect rules, this is a capital offense." Without waiting for Lan Yu to speak, Ling Xiao sneered disdainfully and said coldly, "This senior brother's words are really ridiculous. What did you say?" Chapter 360. Haha. Then what qualifications do you have to point fingers at me? Trash ranked 10th among the top 10 core disciples. Facing Meng Yuan's sarcasm, Ling Xiao retorted, "If I was still a 7th heavenly layer transcendent at your age, I would have already killed myself by slamming my head against a wall. Shame on you! He was not afraid of Meng Yuan. Although he was not Meng Yuan's opponent right now, if he wanted to escape, Meng Yuan would not be able to do anything to him. Meng Yuan's killing intent became even stronger, but in front of Lan Yu, he really did not dare to act. What about me? It was just a spar. Yet the sword human king actually took a forbidden pill. Isn't that a violation of the rules? Ling Xiao continued coldly, and in the end, the sword human king's injuries were caused by himself. What does it have to do with me? He was poisoned because he used a deadly poison, and he was seriously injured because he took a forbidden pill. For such a person, I can only say that he deserves it. Meng Yuan's originally fair skin flushed red with anger and embarrassment after being questioned by Ling Xiao on the basis of reason, which was like a barrage of arrows. With his arrogant temperament, besides the flame deity, no one had ever dared to reprimand him in public, so how could he endure it? Good. What a sharp tongue. In that case, I, Meng Yuan, as an inner sect disciple, challenge you to a spar. If you really are a man, accept it. Meng Yuan said coldly, perhaps because he was suppressing his anger. His voice was filled with anger. Ha ha ha. Ling Xiao suddenly burst into laughter. What are you laughing at? Meng Yuan asked. I'm laughing at you. As expected of that old fart, the flame deity's disciple. Instead of learning good things, you've learned how to bully the weak and bully the weak. Ling Xiao said disdainfully, a dignified 7th heavenly layer transcendent realm master actually wants to spar with an outer sect half-step grandmaster. Don't you have any shame? If this matter spreads out, even if you're not afraid of being ridiculed by other sects, does Yuehua school not have any shame? Below the stage, many inner sect disciples felt very embarrassed. The sword human king's request to spar with Ling Xiao was acceptable. After all, he was only a first-layer transcendent realm cultivator. The so-called inner sect's joint training was prepared for first transcendent realm inner sect disciples, allowing them to regain their self-confidence against outer sect disciples. Inner sect disciples above second-layer transcendent realm cultivators wouldn't participate. Meng Yuan's Meng, junior, senior, junior, senior, senior, junior, senior, Meng, senior, junior, senior, senior. Truly disappointing. How could senior brother Meng Yuan act like this? That's right. That's too narrow-minded. How shameless he... Why did I admire such a person in the past? Sect junior, senior, junior, senior, sect, senior, 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 junior, junior, Lord, senior, Lord, elder, senior, young, master, young, level junior, grandsta to the end? To you. Young to you? Just as Meng Yuan was in a dilemma, wondering if he should force his way out, a cold voice called out. It was a pair of slender legs. Lan Yu, floated onto the stage, stared at Meng Yuan and said, Meng Yuan, you and I are both core disciples. If we spar, we'll be evenly matched. In order to avoid people saying you're taking advantage of others, why don't we have a spar? Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Lan Yu stood beside Ling Xiao, her beautiful eyes darting around. Her pretty face was filled with a chilling coldness. Looking at Lan Yu, beside him, Ling Xiao couldn't help smiling wryly. Senior sister Lan, you really don't need to do this. Lan Yu, his cherry lips curled into a smile. I know you're not afraid of him, but there are some methods that don't need to be used so quickly. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at Meng Yuan and continued. Junior brother Meng Yuan, as one of the top 10 core disciples, sparring with an outer core disciple is truly beneath the bearing of a core disciple, and it would truly be bad if news of this were to spread. It just so happens that the competition for the position of junior sect master is about to begin, so we can spar here, and it's beneficial to both of us. Meng Yuan looked at Lan Yu. His heart was filled with dread. He was very clear about his own capabilities. He wasn't afraid of ordinary inner sect disciples, but among the top 10 core disciples, he was ranked at the bottom. None of them were easy to deal with. What's more, Lan Yu was ranked second. He couldn't help but look at Ling Xiao and sneered, "Ling Xiao, I think you're just SOO, a guy who only knows how to hide behind a woman." Ling Xiao grinned and said, "Ha ha ha, I know you're jealous. Jealous that senior sister Lan is willing to protect me and ignore you, right?" Meng Yuan was infuriated until he jumped in rage, his internal organs burning. Ling Xiao, this fellow's mouth, was seriously too formidable. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior sister Lan, let's wait until the competition for the position of young sect master. I was rude just now." Meng Yuan finally chose to endure. This was definitely a wise move. Otherwise, the one who would make a fool of himself here today would definitely not be Ling Xiao, but him. When Deacon Wang saw that Meng Yuan had shut up, he reluctantly announced, "The outer court's number 1, Ling Xiao, is victorious. The sparring is over. The inner court, disciple swordsman kings, abode belongs to Ling Xiao." He was responsible for arranging cave mansions for inner sect disciples below the transcendent realm 5th layer. So if he said so, it meant that the matter was settled. After all, even if these deacons were unhappy with someone, they wouldn't show it too obviously. They would only make things difficult for the other party behind their backs. Hearing this, Ling Xiao couldn't help but smile. He didn't care whether the swordsman king died or not. As long as he got the cave mansion, that was enough. Wasn't the reason he accepted this competition for the swordsman king's cave mansion? He jumped off the stage together with Lan Yu. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. Although defeating a peak, transcendent realm 3rd layer inner sect disciple wasn't difficult, defeating a peak, transcendent realm 3rd layer inner sect disciple as an outer sect disciple with a half-step grandmaster cultivation wasn't difficult. This was incredible. It was simply another pioneering feat, Senior Sister Lan. You're so protective of that kid, but I'm afraid you don't know that he's not far from death. In the crowd, Meng Yuan was still indignant and finally couldn't help but shout, "Meng Yuan, what do you mean by that?" Lan Yu frowned. The move he used to defeat the Swordsman King was obviously the 12 Golden Lotus Arts Thunder Celestial Phenomenon. You should know that this martial art is taboo in our Yuehua school. Is Ling Xiao crazy? How dare he cultivate this martial art? Doesn't he know how many talented cultivators died because of this martial art? In the crowd, another inner sect disciple exclaimed, 12 Golden Lotus Arts. Chapter 361. Every disciple who entered the inner sect would hear about the story of the 12 Golden Lotus Arts in their first lesson. The main reason was to let them learn from it. After all, this martial art had once caused the most terrible tragedy in Yuehua school. No one in Yuehua school wanted to repeat the same mistake. Below the challenge stage, the inner sect disciples' faces changed as if they had heard something terrifying. In the past, there were genius disciples who didn't believe in heresy and insisted on cultivating the 12 Golden Lotus Arts. But the results were all the same. Either their martial arts were crippled or their lives were in danger. I have the most right to speak on this matter. One of my junior brothers was a rare genius who had reached the divine grade treasure body in all 3 aspects. But in the end, he suffered from chi deviation and died miserably in the training room. That's why people who cultivate the 12 Golden Lotus Arts are either idiots, madmen, or arrogant and ignorant. For a moment, everyone looked at Ling Xiao with eyes filled with schadenfreude, pity, sympathy, and other complicated emotions. It was as if Ling Xiao's fate could no longer be changed. It was as if Ling Xiao was walking down the path of self-destruction. The faster his strength increased, the stronger his ability, the faster he would walk down the path of self-destruction. Listening to these people's discussions, Ling Xiao couldn't help but secretly smile. No matter what they said, it had no effect on him at all. But perhaps these people were right. He really did have a trace of madness in his bones. If he didn't have this madness, he wouldn't have today's achievements. There were some things that if you didn't try because you thought you couldn't succeed, then you would never succeed. And if you tried, at least the chances wouldn't be zero. He looked at Meng Yuan and tried to suppress his impulse to challenge this core disciple. There was a voice in his heart saying, "Kill him. What are you afraid of? He's always against you. Sooner or later, he'll bring you trouble. Use your trump card. You can definitely kill him." But Ling Xiao didn't do that. Impulse was a feeling that everyone had. It was just that some people could control their impulse, and some people would be controlled by their impulse. Ling Xiao was very clear that if he used all his trump cards now, there was a high chance he could accidentally kill Meng Yuan. But so what? If he exposed his trump card, his mountain river martial spirit, and the power of the ancient golden dragon, he would be in greater danger. Quickly look, the number one of the top 10 core disciples. Ren Xingtian is here. Suddenly, there was an uproar in the crowd. Ling Xiao turned his head and saw a well-proportioned young man with dark circles under his eyes walking over. Ren Xingtian is only 20 years old, but he's already a 30% half-step Empyrean. He's even more fierce than Lan Yu. Yes, this is what it means to be young and promising. Among the inner sect disciples, most of them were envious and in awe of Ren Xingtian. Ren Xingtian's appearance was very free and easy. Apart from the obvious dark circles under his eyes, he was even more handsome than Meng Yuan. In addition, the dark circles under his eyes gave him a devilish charm, making him stand out from the rest. Therefore, he naturally had a large number of female fans, who cultivated the 12 golden lotus arts. Ren Xingtian's voice was somewhat languid, as if he had no strength. But in the ears of those female disciples, it was like the sound of nature. Reporting to young sect master, "It's that outer sect disciple Ling Xiao." Meng Yuan cupped his hands respectfully at Ren Xingtian and reported. Ren Xingtian glanced at Ling Xiao indifferently, then retracted his gaze and said 4 words in an icy voice. "Reckless and blind. Humph! Ren Xingtian, do you really think of yourself as the future sect master? My people are not up to you to evaluate like this." If it were others, they absolutely would not dare to speak to Ren Xingtian like this. But Lan Yu was not afraid of Ren Xingtian. Perhaps among the top 10 core disciples, only Lan Yu and the one ranked 3rd dared to challenge Ren Xingtian. The rest really did not have the guts. "Your people?" Ren Xingtian glanced at Lan Yu, indifferently, and suddenly revealed a hint of disdain as he said with a cold smile, "I always thought that, Lan Yu, you would not be tempted by men. I did not expect that after picking here and there, you actually chose such a trash." And Ling Xiao furrowed his brows. These inner disciples were really arrogant and conceited. In their eyes, outer sect disciples were just trash and trash. Ren Xingtian, in this battle for the position of young sect master, I will definitely pull you down. Lan Yu coldly said. She was really angry. Ha ha ha, angry? Angry because of a trash? Ren Xingtian laughed loudly, and then suddenly pounced at Ling Xiao at an extremely fast speed. That's great. I like to see you angry. I wonder if you will cry after I kill him? Ha ha ha. Just thinking about it is fun. Madman. Lan Yu secretly cursed and stood in front of Ling Xiao. Ren Xingtian was not Meng Yuan. This guy was a complete madman. In the entire Yuehua school, he really killed whoever he wanted without any consideration, because his talent was too outstanding. Even if he killed the relatives of the elders, he would not receive any real punishment. At most, he would be fined his salary or face the wall to reflect on his mistakes. That kind of punishment really had no binding force on him. Can you block it? Ren Xingtian's hand was as white as jade. Such a beautiful hand. But it was a pair of murderous hands. There were thousands of people who died under this hand, if not tens of thousands. Since Ren Xingtian became an inner disciple, every time he took a task, it was a task to kill people. Other tasks were simply not in his eyes. This hand could kill people, and it was very terrifying. La knew, or did not dare to neglect. She knew that her cultivation was not as good as Rin Xingtian's, and her actual combat experience was not as good as Rin Xingtian's. But she must protect Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao's mouth suddenly moved. Lan Yu was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly changed her move and attacked in a direction that was obviously not an attack. However, at this time, Ren Xingtian retreated. He stopped his attack and stood there with a puzzled look on his face. "How did you find out my real attack?" Ren Xingtian asked. His words puzzled all the inner court disciples who were watching. No comment. Lan Yu secretly exclaimed. In fact, she did not see Ren Xingtian's real attack at all. She only heard Ling Xiao's sound transmission. Although she was shocked, how could Ling Xiao find out the secret of Ren Xingtian's move? She really could not say it at this time. Ren Xingtian looked at Ling Xiao and said, "You are lucky today. Listen to me and quickly stop practicing the 12 golden lotus arts. Otherwise, you will be dead before I can kill you." That was a completely commanding tone, which would make anyone who heard it feel extremely uncomfortable. After saying that, Ren Xingtian returned to the crowd and no longer said anything.